men across the hall from each other. So make sure if you need to use the bathroom at any time. We have water for everyone here, coffee and pastries here in the morning. We also have, thanks to Viviana, a quiet room. So if anyone is feeling like they just want to take a break, feel free to use the quiet room at any time. We also want you to feel comfortable around the room. So you see, we've got some wide chairs, we've got open space, we've got the quiet room. We want you to be here and we want you to be comfortable. So this is a professional meeting, but if you need to take a step away, maybe even lie down in the back of the room, you're welcome to. We want everyone to feel comfortable and ready to participate. So again, we've got a panel here in the morning that we're about to start. All of you should have gotten the agenda through the email we sent. So our first panel will be in a few moments. Then at 11:15, we're going to start an interactive activity, and we're going to ask for you all to participate in that. We'll start our next panel at 11:45 to 12:30. And then at 12:30, we'll break for lunch from 12:30 to 1:30. So folks on Zoom, that could be your time to take lunch too if you're here with us all day. We will start up our next panel from 1:30 to 2:30. We'll immediately go into our last panel from 2:30 to about 3:15, and then we'll wrap up. We'll do a little bit of lessons of what you learned. We'll present a little bit from our interactive activity of what we heard from all of you, and any next steps or follow-ups as well. We also have information in the back for Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. If any other service providers want to share information, whether it's pamphlets or business cards, please feel free. This is an opportunity to grow and network together. That's one of the goals of today's summit. So we are, again, so grateful that you're here.
Off mic.
Did the mic drop?
Yeah.
Back. Okay, sorry. So we're always very grateful that you're here. Michelle, am I missing any details?
So I'm not sure that I'm picking up either.
No.
There we go. I think we have to talk to the side of the microphone and not the top of the microphone. Are there any access needs that are currently unmet in the room? That would be my question. Or online? They can put it into chat, yeah. So let us know throughout the day if you're having any difficulties. That I think we have limited control over the temperature in here. But we do have a little bit. There's water and other things, and I'm glad to see everybody here.
Sorry, the mic's in and out.
Yeah, that's
maybe but
yeah.
it might be a battery.
Yeah.
So
Might be.
those latest battery.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and get started with the first panel. And I'm going to turn the mic in the moment to Sherry Burns, who's going to introduce herself and the moderator.
Yes. Get that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we have problems with that, we'll just share this mic.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
How about online? Wonderful. My name is Sherry Burns. As Alex mentioned, I'm the executive director of Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. And just a brief visual description of myself. I identify as a white older woman with short brown hair. And I have multiple disabilities and a chronic health condition. And Silicon Valley Independent Living Center is a peer-based, disability-based nonprofit organization that we've been serving members of our community, people with disabilities, older adults, people with chronic health conditions for almost 50 years. Next year will be our 50th anniversary. Excited about that. And our mission is to provide a cadre of services and systems change advocacy to support people with disabilities of all ages and backgrounds to live as inclusively as possible in their communities. With me today on this panel that's titled Community Engagement are 4 community-based experts with professional and or personal experience on this topic. And to get us started, if you can each introduce yourself, your position, and who you're with, if you're with an organization. And please tell us, how would you define community engagement? And we're going to start off with you, Michelle.
So, from
You may need to share because you want to be on.
yeah, it's just not. Okay, okay. So my name is Michelle Mashburn. I am the founder of All Things Disability Equity. I'm also currently the pushing visionary behind it, which and that organization was developed because of the gap in society for people with disabilities. We're often left out. We're often also not even invited to spaces. So that's where community engagement comes in. This event was pulled together in one of the more inclusive processes, I think, that we've seen in the South Bay. And, included the detailed descriptions, things like that, trying to meet a cross disability invitation to everybody. I think community engagement starts with that invitation. And it's about asking us to be in the room without us having to ask permission for accommodation to be in the room. And that's where what I try to practice through All Things Disability Equity and in my personal life. I think some people call me an inclusion junkie, but I do think that engagement begins with creating an equitable and equal opportunity for people to engage. And until that reality is met, we actually don't even achieve community engagement unless we're on that level playing field.
Thank you. Viviana?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Viviana Barnwell. I am the founder of DEAR, Disabilities, Education, Accessibility, and Resources, and I am involved in a lot of organizations. Some of them don't even have to do with disabilities, because I always want to push forward the disability agenda. There is what Michelle said, I completely align with. And I'm going to quote a very famous, worldwide famous disability advocate called Berna Myers. She said, diversity is asking people to go to the party. Inclusion is letting them dance. So I think thinking about, this is an event mainly about accessibility, but we wanted to have this specific panel about engagement because we want to say, and my degree is in law. So many times when people think about accessibility, they think about ADA and we're compliant with the law. Engagement is not thinking about the law, but the people for whom those laws were written. Many times we think check, but we're forgetting to have a more person-centered mindset and think, who's the person that I'm asking to come here? So I'm going to a little challenge what Michelle said, and I don't think engagement is inviting the person. Engagement, accessibility is inviting them. Engagement is making sure that once you're in there, you have the same experience or a similar experience as anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Viviana. Please introduce yourself and let us know how you would define community.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Jean Kogetsu, and I'm an occupational therapist. And today I'm representing Unlock Pace, the company I work for, and our mission is to help older adults to age in their homes and to live safely. And for me, community engagement is everyone having the ability to live, play, work, and engage in all their occupations that they favor, including going to the park, dancing, whatever they want to do. So to me, I am a boots on the ground occupational therapist. So I work at a micro level, one-to-one with people, but I also feel like it's really important in terms of community engagement to get involved at different levels. So for me, it's really important for people to have access.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Alice.
Can you turn that off, Jean?
Hi, good morning. Can everyone hear? Hi, thank you so much, Alex, Michelle, Terry, and my fellow panelists, for having us here. My name, I could talk mic, but you'll let me know. My name is Alice Turner, and, can I just ask, is it on mic?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My name is Alice Turner, and I was the director of corporate engagement and community involvement for an organization, Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. They're located in Palo Alto, and they have serving pretty much throughout Silicon Valley. So San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, San Benito. And the mission is that we believe that individuals who are blind or have low vision can live a full and independent life. And then I'm also on the board for another organization, California Council of the Blind. That's an organization of the blind and low vision. And I was with Vista Center for 18 years. And then I had the opportunity to move to another organization, Life Moves, which is an organization similar to Vista Center, that the focus is on wraparound services and to be able to help people get integrated into life. And so both of those experiences have been amazing. And now I'm currently retired and also open for other engagement at this point. So community engagement, for me, it's really means not only invitations, but it's involving individuals with disabilities in all aspects. So it would be in cultural, in educational, in social, in economic, in civic, and involving so that those individuals are involved and at the table to be able to provide input from lived experience in making critical decisions. And that engagement needs to be ongoing, organic, but structured and completely able to be sustained. So that's my definition, Sherry.
Thank you so much. Are we still having problems with the microphone?
I can hear that it's going on.
Check meetings.
Yeah. It's always funny that the tech.
Okay, we'll try this one while he's working on that one. Okay, for now, let's go. Keep your fingers crossed. Okay, thank you so much for your introductions and your thoughts on the definition of community engagement. Our next question, we have a little bit more time for you to respond to. What do you see as the impact of not including people with various disabilities, including older adults, in accessible community and business engagement? What do you see as the impact of not including people with disabilities, including older adults, in accessible community and business engagement? And we're going to start with you, Ellen.
Okay, great. Okay, so in the work, is this better and consistent? Okay. So in the work that I did at Vista Center for 10 years, I started a program that had to do with providing consulting work, both in all areas. And so it would be in the city, in the county, for individuals that plan out traffic, and also in the business world, in the corporate world. And what happens when individuals with different abilities are not included is that it is very costly. It is far more difficult to go back and re-engineer whatever it is that the outcome, the desired outcome, than to factor in that perspective prior to significant planning. The other real negative impact to that, so cost and time. And I think when you start to think about what happens, think in terms of layering on some kind of accommodation after the plans have been put into place. So that time needs to go back and sometimes undo and be able to start from ground zero. So one of the things that I found that happens so often is that when we would be consulting with individuals for products or services to make sure that they're not only accessible, but usable. And there is a difference between the two. I can give you a brief example. Accessible might be that I can swipe on my phone and after 14 swipes, I can get to an edit box. Usable is I can swipe on my phone and the edit box is going to appear for me. So there really is, and oftentimes we have to define and help people to understand the difference between the letter of accessibility and usability. The other aspect that is cost, time, but this involvement that happens when individuals are at the table providing consultation for all different abilities, because no one person is the same. Involving them or not involving them, it absolutely means that you don't have the right people at the table. We have found that whether it is a building, whether it's a social, whether it's a park, whether it's a product, an iPhone, an autonomous vehicle, and we consulted on all of those, when you involve individuals who have different abilities and disabilities, you have a better outcome. You have a better product. You have not only an inclusive world, but you have a world that works better for others. So very, very, very quick example. If you have a website and that website ends up having all of these wonderful pop-ups and ads and all of these things that will occur on that, when it is designed in a way where it is still interesting to people that use the visual, but it's linear and it's focused, people who have vision don't even realize that they're getting a better experience. And so by designing with the different abilities in mind, you're actually designing for the entire population. And my very last point is, if you leave out individuals with disabilities and seniors, we're talking about leaving out the population that's millions and millions. And so when this collective group comes together, wouldn't you rather have them at the table? Thank you. Shall I pass? Yes, thank you so much, Alice. Go ahead, Jean, your thoughts.
It's hard to pass that up. I agree with you 100%. We need to have everyone at the table. And today, as mentioned, I'm representing the older adult population whom I serve in my current role. But just I think we all know is the fastest growing, the silver tsunami has hit. And so if we don't consider including them and others, then it's very costly. And I agree with, 100%. Very costly. It's hard to fix things that maybe could have been, if certain populations or different populations were consulted ahead of time, it would have made it less costly to change things later. So for me, on the ground level, the kind of things I see, let's say at the micro level, is if someone lives in an apartment, a full-time wheelchair user, unable to reach their clothing rack, then I would help advocate to lower it and contact apartments and things like that. But wouldn't it have been nice if it was lowered from the get-go? So it's just a lot of fixing to do is very, very costly. The other thing is for the population I work with, many of them use walkers, wheelchairs, canes, other mobility devices. A lot of people with visual, blindness, low vision, hearing impairment. So if we don't have environments or settings to include them, that's also people not going out to restaurants, spending money. So in terms of finances too, they want to spend money too and go out. So I think financially too. So leaving out large groups of populations is not a good move. So I think involving right from the get-go, from planning stages and even before, is really important. So I'm going to pass the mic to Vivian.
Thank you. So, when I introduced myself, I failed to say that the reason why I am a disability advocate and I'm so involved is because I'm the parent of a young child with multiple disabilities. So I'm going to focus a little on younger people with disabilities, but also agreeing with both of my teammates here. There's a time cost, there's a financial cost, but there's also an emotional cost. The mental health of people who get not invited to participate, or when they show up, there are not things in place so they can enjoy the experiences. I think it's really important, especially because now we're more open to talk about mental health. For younger people, and I think for everyone, also the opportunities to better or develop their social and language skills when they are excluded. And at the school level, school age level, we see a lot of push for keeping children with disabilities in the most restrictive environment, which is away from their non-disabled peers. And what the core of this is, we all are, most of us, are gregarious. Humans like to be around other humans. So when we're not inviting all these people, this big chunk of the population, we are ourselves denying the opportunity of knowing different human beings with different lived experiences, but also we are denying them of those experiences. Okay.
Thank you, Viviana. So in my experience so it's a lot of work to be disabled because we live in a world that's designed for people that are non-disabled. When I am not included in the conversation, the changes that I then have to request become double or triply more, because I've been included in some outreach sessions for like building design, but we come to the session thinking we're going to help them mitigate the gaps that we know exist. The grab bar, the clothing bar, oftentimes ADA apartments are actually made in a way that, oh, you can't reach the top cabinets. We're just not going to put them in this unit. So, or the laundry room, they plan the laundry room for one washer, one dryer. When you start adding people in doing their clothes, that one washer, that one dryer becomes inaccessible. So even though on the surface you think that you're meeting the needs of the ADA quote unquote compliance, you fail to include what people with disabilities actually need. So that's a societal cost, it's an individual cost, it's a community cost, and it blocks the success of disabled people. Disabled people can do many, many things. You miss the opportunity to learn how to do things differently and often better. Innovative technology has come from disabled people. Screen readers were originally for disabled people. Now how many of you use voice to text? How many of you, how many of you use captions on your TV? So these are things that have been universalized and they become benefits for everybody. Curb cuts. Curb cuts are one of those things. People with disabilities had to demand that they exist. But then if you make them in a way that we can't use them, you've failed to meet our needs and you've made a community less. So overall, when engagement is inadequate, you don't learn the needs of the community. And while many places quote people with disabilities as 1 in 4 people, well, actually, locally, the rate is deemed from the census, which is like between 8 and 10%. But if you go to another data set, it's actually 26 to 27% of our population, and that's with the general age group. When you get up to seniors, you've got almost 50% of the people that are disabled. So we fail to serve 50% of our population if we fail to engage with that population from the beginning. And I echo what everybody else said about the cost of it. When you have to add accessibility in as an afterthought, you've added me in as an afterthought. I admit I sometimes take that personally, but you've added many people in as an afterthought. You failed to include them at all. And it's time that we start engaging at the start with people with disabilities from a diverse range of disabilities, because I can only speak from my experience. And I mean, I try to advocate from the experience of the community, but ultimately I need Alice in the room, and I need Viviana in the room to talk about the youth experience. And I need Jean in the room and Sherry in the room to talk about their experiences as well. So when there's an advisory panel that is one person with one disability, you haven't done community engagement. So community engagement by design, and I think that's the emphasis here, is flawed to start with, and we have to make that change.
Thank you so much.
Hold on to the mic, Viviana. You're going to start us off with our next question. This is Carrie speaking again. What strategies have you utilized or seen utilized to engage a variety of people with disabilities in accessible engagement? How has that made a difference in our cities and communities? And please share some examples if you have them. Viviana.
So, this comes from the premise that I think that, as I said at the beginning, we're not trying to comply with a law. We're not trying to look nice. We're trying to touch human beings. We're trying to invite and engage human beings. Aside from the label, aside from the diagnosis, we're talking about human beings. So since we're talking about engagement, one of the things that has worked for me as someone who's very active in the community, and as I said, last night I was in a coalition for artists from the city of San Jose, and I am the least artistic person in the world, but I wanted to talk about how are we making public art accessible and inclusive. And at the end, there were points taken based on what I said. So I'm like, that's a win. So for me, one important thing is always bringing this mindset of we are all learners. Before I had my child, I had no clue of the disability world. So I try to be very humble and don't say, oh, you don't know anything. Try to always pick people, support them in learning, assume best intentions, but more than anything, having a person-centered mentality when we're trying to make people feel welcome, when we're trying to understand them. And for me, one of the biggest wins has been the quiet rooms. So every organization I work with, I'm like, can we have a quiet room? Because a quiet room is a big measure for engagement. If I am feeling overwhelmed, if I'm feeling sensory overload, if I'm feeling stressed, I'm not gonna be engaged. I started with the city of San Jose, actually, with the vice mayor office. They do this big event called Music in the Valley. So I said, that's a major sensory overload for people. So I proposed, I'm gonna bring everything, don't worry, just let me know what tent is gonna be to be used. And we had the quiet corner for that event. And after that, they reach out to me and they say, we're gonna have another event. You don't need to bring your things, just let us know what we can buy so we can have a quiet space and people can be feeling the way they want to feel without no one giving them the looks, without anybody judging, and so everybody can be engaged and feel at their best.
Thank you so much.
Okay, there we go. Michelle, you're right. Goes the other way.
Go the other way.
Okay, so repeat the question again.
Yes, it's a multifaceted question. What strategies have you utilized or seen utilized to engage a variety of people with disabilities in community engagement? And how has that made a difference in our cities and communities?
So for me, I tend to be called an inclusion junkie oftentimes, and I think I focus almost too much on the various elements, and I worry a lot about it. But ultimately, you use a multi-front approach. Access needs are human needs first and foremost. They are not special needs. They are not special different abilities. They are just access needs. As a human need, if you need to go rest, you go rest, right? But for a person with disabilities, because I'm in this wheelchair, I may not be able to rest in the same space that you can, or for a variety of different ways. So in community engagement, and I've seen this done really, really well by groups up in San Francisco that are led by disabled, where they created a protest march that was fully inclusive, and they had a trailer that had a bed in it for people to lay down if they were too tired. Society sets these standards of this is what professional is. And I say that with air quotes because professionalism is a set of standards that are kind of dictated to leave certain people out and to demand certain conformance from other people. And instead of allowing that to happen, when we get creative and we allow everybody in the room, regardless of the difference that they bring with them, and we're able to adapt to their human needs, which they are human needs, even though the laws say that they're special needs or their accommodation requests, we can actually develop and build something so much better. Certain tools, a lot of this starts though with education. I don't know how many people know that you have, like, if you have an iPhone, you actually have accessibility features in that iPhone. Have many people played with those elements? Have you tried to do voiceover on that? I got trapped in it the other day.
It does.
It's so hard because I couldn't turn it off. But I mean, it's hugely, you learn so much when you start to engage with the programs that other people rely on. And if we're not doing that, if we don't have a user design, if we don't have a profile of a user that is a professional, say gender non-binary, Black woman who's disabled at a high level, a professional level, you're not designing your program in an accessible way because it's flawed from the start. So part of this has to go to that education. Part of this has to go to understanding and realizing that when you're asking me to be someplace, it's extra work for me to be there. I kind of need, I work under a disability justice practice, which is the person most impacted and most at risk in our society is the people we want in the room because they have the solutions. And we need to listen to those people. But if we're not even inviting those people, we're not able to fix things and make it better. So there are tools, there are text box, solutions that we can learn. There are classes that we can hold. The ADA has been a law for 35 years, and there are laws that are even older than that. So why is it that we still face this barrier of understanding, this gap of knowledge that doesn't invite people with disabilities in? And I'll say, for me, that answer is ableism, which is the internalized discrimination and the negative treatment towards disability. And we internalize that because we have a steady diet of it throughout our lives. We learn ableism in school. We learn it when we see students with disabilities segregated in special education settings. We learn it when we see media with lack of representation. So all of these things are important, but community engagement starts by inviting and making sure everybody's access needs are met, which is what I did with that question a little bit ago about our access needs met. I could have forged forward, and we've been struggling some with online, and I appreciate the efforts of people with meeting those access needs as well. But these are all simple tools. So why aren't we doing them? And that's where community engagement has to start, is those solutions that can bring more people forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Jeannie, would you like to go ahead? And since you have the microphone, you can have it started. What strategies have you utilized or seen utilized to engage a variety of people with disabilities in community engagement? And how has that made a difference in our communities?
Well, this is a big question. I think for me, as I listen, it's like, wow, I feel like I haven't done enough, And even though I've been an occupational therapist for 30 years, and I agree with Michelle, it starts with education. I do teach occupational therapy students. So I think for me, it's really important to educate them and for them to understand that people with disabilities need to be involved from the very beginning. So for me, so that's the teaching part of it, but for my practice, I see a lot of falls. I see because someone tripped on wet leaves. I see falls because they tripped on a curb that wasn't marked because they couldn't see it. Things like that. So it riles me up. So I do a lot of storytelling in my teaching. And for me, that's where I can get involved at a different level. So around the time before the pandemic, before 2020, I started seeing a lot of those scooters left on sidewalks. And I was riled because I thought of the people I served and how they could easily trip on that. So in terms of education, we talked about it in the classroom. We talked about it at work. So getting involved at a different level. So I talked about the micro involvement in my practice, but getting involved at a different level, letter writing, those kind of things make a difference, showing up to meetings. And that's around the time the pandemic hit, but I know I was pretty riled up about those scooters being left on the road. And the other ones are even things like leaves on the sidewalk, things like that. So it's kind of basic things. So for me, that's where I realize I haven't done enough. And so it's really good to have very diverse panel today to see how we've been involved. So that's sort of been my involvement.
How are we? Yeah, we're so good. Yes. I keep on doing the sound check. Sorry. And I will not ask the question, do you hear me now? I hate that question. So when it comes to success stories, you've heard several here today. I can give you just 2 or 3, but I think most important thing is to not generalize based on a disability. So there is, I'm blind, by the way, and I did not do that introduction. And I'm also a middle, somewhat old white woman. with a brown kind of curly hair. But basically, and I always forget about this description. So when you hear the word blind, what do you think? Right? You probably think lights out, can't see a thing. That represents a very small portion of the population. When you think in terms of low vision, that's so wide. And so that's my area of focus when I'm consulting and working, that if you make the assumption that one group with one specific disability behaves and performs this way, then you're going to be surprised at the end because there are many different perspectives with many different abilities. So I'll give you one quick example of how it is that this works out well. When my main suggestion is reach out to those that serve individuals with a specific disability or disabilities in general. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so many people have come to this center, as I mentioned. The best scenarios is that when they're coming, we find out what it is their desired outcome is. Then we would pull together and help them with focus group questions. What are things that they may not even be thinking about? And then we have various different involvements throughout the process. So because you may take a swipe at it, literally, and then you need to be able to go back and refine. And so involvement, don't make assumptions about one particular individual and their ability or disability, and then structure it so that they are giving the feedback and that feedback gets incorporated. Then you come back and be able to make some minor adjustments. So we did that with autonomous vehicles. We've done that with smartphones. We've done that with entertainment. We've done that with traffic signals. And I think the more that involvement and engagement is something that is sequential, thoughtful, structured and the feedback loop is continuous, then you're gonna win. So there you go.
Great, thank you. Oh, hang on.
Yeah, you can hold on to it, Alice. We'll have you start, we'll just go down the line and have Michelle close this out. This is our last question. And what I'd like you to share is in 1 or 2 quick sentences, what is one takeaway that you would like this audience to leave with today regarding community engagement? What's one takeaway? No, please start.
Okay.
No.
So I think the one takeaway is something that I just referred to, is that in this county, in this area, it is very, very rich with nonprofits that serve a variety of different people with different abilities and disabilities. Tap into those resources because, for example, at Vista Center, I would have a database of 3,600 people that live in Northern California. And those, we can customize it in a way that you can get the feedback when you want. So a focus group that is not involving an expert in that area, you're going to do a wide net and maybe one person who's low vision will show up. So I think that's really important. And then the other aspect is that with that feedback loop, please do be open to the feedback. So as you're going through the process, know that the tweaks that will be there will be something that will help the process and then inform about time. That's it. That was longer than one takeaway, sorry.
That's okay.
We have 6 minutes, and we're doing good. In a couple minutes each person. Jean, your thoughts.
I think the biggest takeaway today is have as many people at the table as you can, and not just at the very beginning, but throughout the process, like Alice said. So I think that's my takeaway.
My takeaway is let's take care of accessibility and law, but also let's have a more person-centered approach and have the genuine interest of bringing people who have a different lived experience. Because if we focus just on I am compliant, check mark, we're forgetting the human beings that do thrive when there's engagement.
This is Michelle. I'm going to go a little bit different with this. There's something that's called preconditions for inclusion. And those preconditions have to be met in order for people with disabilities to be in the room, right? So one key part is to think about those realities as well. Did you include a paratransit drop-off point to your event? Did the exercise you created for your community engagement include a way that people that use screen readers can engage with? Do you think or consider somebody with complex and multiple disabilities in what you're trying to do? Because trust me, I walked from having invisible disabilities into having visible disabilities. So I've experienced not just 1 or 2 disabilities, but I also have chronic medical conditions and other things. So as people age, it becomes more complicated for me to engage. It's also estimated that people with disabilities who work have another full-time job of managing their disability. And that has to be factored in. And when we start to factor in these human needs, we really start to serve everybody in our communities. We start to serve the person who broke their leg last weekend. We start to serve the person that had eye surgery or other things. You know, when we're aware of these things, when we can engage with people where they're at, and it's a lot of work, but I think it's work that we eventually, it's seeds that are planted that cultivate into a beautiful garden of diversity. The other thing is to remember disability shows up differently in different communities. An immigrant disabled experience is different from a white person's disabled experience. It's different from a Black person's disabled experience. When you add poverty into that, the preconditions come into factor even that much more. And I just think these are important caveats to what we're doing and how we do it. And it's too much to cover in 2 minutes, but that was my blip of things, so.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you all of our panelists this morning to guide us through this discussion and opening up our summit today on community engagements and the importance of involving as many people in planning and throughout the process, as Jean said, not just in the beginning. So thank you all for your thoughts on this particular topic. And if you want to clap, then would be great. And thank you, attendees, both in the room as well as online, for participating in this particular panel discussion. As Alex mentioned, we are now going to move into a community engagement activity. We're going to engage all of you in a particular activity. And this being, you know, a educational setting, we also want to check for learning. So, Alex, are you going to lead them into the room activity?
Thank you so much. As our panelists are coming down from the stage, we also have built in a little time for break here. If anyone needs the bathroom or take a little rest, you're welcome to do that. I am going to start explaining the activity. And as we're in the activity, that means you can also take a break if you need to while we're doing the activity. So for those who are on Zoom, you're welcome to share thoughts in the Zoom chat. We will write those down and put them up on the board. My colleague Shalini, who's an expert at so many things, will help with that. Meanwhile, for those of you in the room, we've got 3 poster boards behind you. At the back of the room, we have one that says homes, one that says shops, schools, or offices, and one that says public spaces or parks. Those are different types of places in our community that we are designing. And Sherry is perfectly right. This is a great example of community engagement. It's also going to allow us to transition to the next panel that we'll be at 11:45, which will be talking more about physical places. You heard a little bit about that today, but we're going to spend a lot of time thinking about physical places throughout today's summit. So we want to ask you for some of your thoughts. Whether you have a disability or not, whatever your disability might be, you are welcome on the Post-its that have sticky on them to identify that disability or not, to share what you think should be done around either A, homes, B, shops, schools, or offices, or C, public spaces or parks. And you can, whether you want to talk about that disability or not, you can identify how can we make our communities more inclusive for people with disabilities. What are your ideas for how to do that better? We already heard one, curb cuts, for instance, is a great example. But whatever it may be, you're welcome to take a Post-it note. If you can, write on it. If you can't, let one of us know. Just raise your hand and we can write it for you. And then we'll stick those Post-it notes up on each of those 3 boards. And we'll do a share back toward the end of the afternoon about what we heard and what your thoughts are on how we could do that. And for disability advocates on stage and in the room, that will be fantastic learning for them as well. Any questions about that?
Right. All right. So in essence, we're looking for, if you were designing those particular areas, whether it's a home, an office, or shop, theater, school, or open public space, what would you want considered to make it as inclusive as possible? That's what we're looking for. So please feel free to get up. Again, the restrooms are right outside the door and around the corner by the elevator. Please get some water if you'd like, and then pick up some Post-it notes. And again, raise your hand if you need assistance with writing on the Post-it note. We'll be happy to help.
All right, grab that water or coffee if you can. And find your existing or new space. We're going to do a quick share out here. Thank you all so much for your participation. Thank you to the folks on Zoom for your patience. For those of you on Zoom, I took some screenshots of some of what our comments are being put up on the board. So if you can see on the screen on Zoom, I'm going to toggle between first category is homes. I think we have even more comments since this. Here's some comments on shops, schools, or offices. For those of you on Zoom, here's what we're hearing and seeing in the room. And finally, some public spaces or parks. So thank you all for those comments. That's great. We've got about 6-7 minutes. Is anyone really fired up about an idea and wants to share it? We can bring the mic up to you and you can throw out one of your ideas so we can share back a little bit about what we heard. Daniel's not shy. Great. Let's start with Daniel.
I'm Daniel. One of my ideas was, you know how everyone has your biometric passports? I thought the CBP officers, like they do on private jets, should come on the plane and clear everyone with a disability through immigration and to put them through the special VIP door going to the baggage claim. Biometrics, where they come to you, you don't come to them.
Thanks. We're getting some clapping in the room. Should we go to Richard here?
Hello, everyone. One of the things that the cities and counties need to do a good job of is integrated universal design features in all affordable housing so that we can keep accessible housing, not just for people with disabilities, but for seniors, for families that have a child with disability or an adult child with disability. The set aside rules is outdated. It doesn't work. And it can be integrated. City of Fremont has city ordinance with universal design features. Not that they're utilizing it, because housing providers don't want to do it. They think, oh, it's more cost. It's not. It's more cost if you're fixing it, upgrading it, or adding something on as a reasonable accommodation request.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Christine.
Something my brother brought to my attention a long time ago. When he was helping renovate the University of San Francisco. He said that making stairs was far more expensive than designing things without stairs. It should be the ultimate goal, and that way everybody has a chance to go wherever they want to go.
Can I amplify that a little bit, just in case anyone couldn't hear it? Christine Fitzgerald said, talking about having more ramps as opposed to stairs. I think in public places, you mean in particular, right, Christine? Yeah, great, great. Any insights on homes? How to make homes more inclusive for folks with disabilities? Did anyone have a comment they want to share? That's up on the poster board there. Lucila, yes.
Hello, I'm Lucila Chavez. The one thing that I put down was just like with people who are deaf with what is it called, doorbells, they're able to press the button and it starts flashing, so they're able to know who's at the door specifically. Sometimes people who are deaf, they don't make a larger, not louder kind of ring, so they're able to at least hear it depending on the severity of the deafness. Thank you.
Thank you. So installing strobe connection to the doorbell.
Beatrice, Ross?
Yes, here we go.
This is not so much the homes, but it's the schools. I like to see the schools who have garden projects have more garden, and children having more access who have disability to be part of the garden programs in our public schools.
Great, thank you. A few of the senior complexes that have been built in the last few years around the county, I've seen with raised planter beds to make them accessible for all of the residents. So it's a great idea for the school as well. Anyone else? Yes.
For homes, I think about kind of like apartment building, and the larger the apartment building, I think there should be more of elevator access. So if a building is really large and it's flat around, then there should be an elevator in kind of like every corner, so you don't have to
do long have to the elevator, especially for the.
Yes.
Thank you, Yana. Christine, oh, we'll go here to the front and then back to Christine.
I'm just doing a quick time check. We got 3 minutes, so a couple more comments. Be great.
Ways to evacuate people in case of emergency. I just took a snapshot of the evacuator out in the hallway. I've never been in an affordable apartment building that had one.
Yeah. Could you repeat that?
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you, Catherine. Catherine mentioned is making sure that any multi-story complex, a building or housing complex, this is an example, we're on the 4th floor, is to have evacuation chairs right by the elevators that, and that people know how to use them to get folks down in emergency down the stairwell. I'm sure you have others, Christine. You have several that you added to the board over there.
So, I would like to do, but universal design. Everywhere you look, anybody can live there at any time of their life, and it should be paying that person to be.
Universal design was something Christine just said. I think that Kelsey is probably going to talk about that in a minute, I'm guessing, with Louisa. Yeah. Let's go have it. Yeah.
Like build where we are people.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Abigail. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for doing that. We will take photos of these. If you have more ideas throughout the event, you're welcome to add. So during breaks or lunch, you're feel free to track down Shalini or me, and we'll give you some more Post-it notes. We'll take photos like we said, and then we'll share those out with everyone in case because we do have some architects and designers in the room. We have some policymakers, so we want them to have those ideas in their hands as well. Well, speaking of policymakers, we have a great group of people who are going to talk to you about how they've built and designed housing for people with disabilities. And we've got our moderator is going to come up on stage, our new council member in downtown San Jose, Anthony Tordillos. So I'm going to turn things over to Anthony and to the panel if they want to come up, and there's a lift over here if anyone on our panel needs it. And we'll be at this for 45 minutes and then we'll do lunch. So let's, and remember all the panelists, the camera's right here. I'm pointing to it. It's near the Shalini over here to my right. So if you, and we'll capture all of you on stage. Remember, use the microphone when you're talking. That would be great. Okay, Anthony, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here today, everyone. My name is Anthony Tordillos. I'm the latest addition to the San Jose City Council, representing District 3, which includes downtown San Jose and all of our other neighborhoods in the central part of the city. When I was running for council, one of my top priorities was addressing our housing crisis. Recognizing that to truly address our housing crisis, we need to build housing for all members of our community, regardless of ability level. So very excited to be here today to participate in the summit. And have a hopefully very fruitful conversation with some members of our panel who actually have experience building for people with disabilities. So before we jump into the questions, I figured we'd give a brief opportunity for folks on the panel to introduce themselves and their backgrounds.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Louisa Bouquet. I work with the Kelsey, which advances disability forward housing solutions around the country. So we do that by building housing that's disability forward, and also working with local governments, cities, and states to try and create more policies that will support people with disabilities in their homes.
Morning. I am Nick Chen. I'm an architect at Phillips, and I have a small firm. We do mostly affordable, multifamily, accessible housing. I've been doing that for 30 years. And I've worked with the Kelsey as well, and to create the inclusive design standards that other companies around the country are using to create accessible multifamily housing.
Thank you. My name is Paul McGilvey. I'm principal of HKIT Architects. We're a 60-person firm based in downtown Oakland, and our firm's established in 1948, so the third generation of leadership of the firm. I've been working in the Bay Area for 30 years in the multifamily, especially the affordable multifamily sector. Most of my clients are nonprofit developers that are using public funds to help subsidize the work that they do for low-income seniors, families, and special needs. I'm not necessarily an expert in accessibility or disability, but after having done so many different communities for so many different populations, whether it's veterans, transition age youth, I've been educated over the years, and I'm here today to share some of the things that I've picked up.
And my name.
Hello. And my name is Joe Escalante. I am the Assistant Technology Specialist at the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center here in Kansas.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. So as we jump into the first question here, this one is really about regulation and the standards that we try to build to when we talk about accommodating people with disabilities. So obviously we already have the ADA, we have the California Building Code. What are some of the shortcomings in those regulations, and why should we aim for something higher than that when we are talking about building accessible buildings? And we can get started with Eric.
Thank you. So that's a fraught topic. And I think I'll start by saying that the ADA was really a compromise when it was created. It started right when I got out of school at UC Berkeley, and the firm I was working for actually in San Francisco sent me on one of my first days there to the hearings the year before the ADA actually got passed. And what I saw was that there were people from the building industry, building and maintenance and owners, representatives and so forth, who were arguing for steeper ramps and fewer accessibility features. They wanted to have 1 in 10 slope of ramp versus the 1 in 12 that we have now, because they said, oh, shallower ramp is going to take up too much real estate, it's going to cost too much, and it's going to bankrupt the whole country. So these sort of amazing statements that were coming out of their mouths. Whereas on the other hand, against this really strong industry representation that was really coordinated nationally, we had what I call a ragtag team of individuals with disabilities who were saying, no, these proposals of the 1 in 12 ramp, for example, are actually too steep. If you're using a manual wheelchair and you're going up multiple sections of a ramp, that's too steep. If you're using a walker and you're walking down a ramp, it's too steep. So they were saying we need 1 in 15 to actually be comfortable and usable for people with disabilities. So what we got was 1 in 12. So it's a compromise. And I think the building industry doesn't understand necessarily that when you meet the ADA, you don't deserve a gold star. It's not perfection by any means. You've met a compromise. And so now we need to change the discussion and talk about doing better beyond that. Because, it was 34 years ago that compromise was made. And we've only had tiny incremental improvements since then. There are many ideas out there about what people really need. And, ideas like depth space, right? This whole set of concepts around making spaces more accessible and safer and usable for people who can't hear or who are sighted. Ideas about wayfinding for people with different cognitive abilities, different language abilities, or lack of language. The idea that I like to talk about as an architect of making the ramp the primary entrance rather than the secondary entrance. It's a real shift in mindset, and we have so little of that the industry needs to understand that it's not, that meeting the ADA or the building code is not the be all end all. A lot more out there to explore for real accessibility.
Very good.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to that, all really good points. I think also we talk about the ADA as being like the floor, the bare minimum. So it's very important and we should all adhere to it, but there's so much more we can do to actually create comfortable and spaces for people. And the inclusive design standards that Eric mentioned that the Kelsey co-created with Eric are a set of guidelines that the point of them is to show you what you could do that's beyond that, to actually make spaces that people want to spend time in and feel comfortable in. And they cover much more than physical environment as well. They talk about the way people feel in spaces. It goes over the operations of a building, and it focuses on multifamily housing. So hopefully in the future we can expand it to other spaces. But when you think about housing, it's not just what the building is, it's how we have people working in that building to support the needs of the residents. And so thinking much broader than just physical design, but the entire ways we think about using our spaces as a community.
Amazing, thank you for those responses. I love thinking about our building code and the ADA as the floor, having a higher target that we should aim for when we talk about building accessible buildings. And I think also to your point, the ADA is many decades old at this point. Hopefully we've learned a thing or two and have a more expansive vision of what accessibility and inclusion looks like than we did back when that compromise was struck. Thank you for those responses. Our next question is about who we're really building and designing for when we talk about building accessible buildings. Sometimes you hear this notion that people with disabilities may be a narrow segment of the population, particularly if you're talking about accommodating specific types of needs. So what would your response be, I guess, if we were looking about who we're designing for when we're talking about building for accessibility? And for this one, maybe we can get started with Joe.
So designing buildings is to meet the needs of people with disabilities isn't about accommodating a separate group. It's about planning for a reality that disability is a part of the human experience. Disability does not discriminate. It doesn't check your income bracket, it doesn't check your power status, you're a celebrity, doesn't check your race or gender. So no matter how careful you may think you are, whether it's in driving and walking and hiking and biking, it can find you. So it's important to keep all those factors in mind when designing for a person with a disabled community, because it's not about them, it's about us. And understanding that, again, no matter what precautions you may take, it may happen, whether it's sclerosis, Parkinson's. So accessibility isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And so by creating spaces that work for everyone, for architects and developers, can ensure that we all have the dignity, the independence, and equal opportunity for all, but not just for now, but for the future.
I love that. Thank you for that response. And I think the point about the fact that disability doesn't discriminate, and also that disability can kind of come out of nowhere, it can be temporary, is really important. Speaking from my personal experience, a couple of years back, my mom had a fall and she broke her hip. And at the time, she was living in a two-story home. Spent about 2 months where she couldn't navigate the stairs. Had to, find other accommodations, stay with family, set up a temporary, sleeping area on the ground floor. Whereas if she had a home that was actually designed with accessibility in mind, that might have been an easier process. Next up, let's go over to Eric.
Yeah, so I love that point because I have a corollary where I have a very accessible home that I designed. And we have often in the 5 years now since we did a remodel and created a primary suite with a super accessible roll-in shower. We have had several neighbors who have had hip surgery, knee surgery, other things, and they live in two-story houses. They couldn't get upstairs to their bathroom and shower, so they were downstairs with a powder room. So they would come over to our house and shower. And one even stayed for a week because she was so immobile. So we are sort of this little, beacon. And I never, even though I've worked in this field and focused on inclusivity for all this time, I never thought of that particular aspect of being a neighborhood service provider, you know, in this way. And it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of scary because what would all these people have done without them, right? So I think that, you know, sort of circling back to your question, there's an idea, and sort of Joe, you were saying this in a way that, again, the profession and outside the profession, but certainly speaking about developers and architects, there's an idea of othering, where people with disabilities are the other. Just like, you know, if you think back when you were a child, right? It's like, look at the old people. You know, they were other. We didn't make a connection between us growing into that. We knew intellectually that we wind up there. But, you know, I think as I've talked to many people about this idea, there's not that sense of connectivity that you only realize when you get to be like my age. And so that sense of othering is a very dangerous thing. And it makes the people who are making the decisions about everybody's lives sometimes make the wrong decision. So I like to talk about the importance for designing for the outlier population. So that's maybe the population that's not at the core of the building code or not at the core of what we think is necessary in a space to make it a comfortable space, whether it's lighting and whether it's flickering a little bit that 99% of the people can't notice, but that certain people with different eyesight conditions, with different neurocognitive conditions can see that flicker and are disturbed by it. So when we understand those outlying needs, then we can create better buildings for everybody because we solve for those and we solve for the interior. A very common way to talk about this is to use the curb cut effect. So that idea is that, you know, in the 1970s in Berkeley, some rogue people with disabilities went out in the middle of the night, busted up some street corners and put in the first curb cuts ever anywhere. And the city was very upset. People with disabilities loved it. And as curb cuts caught on, people who were pushing children with strollers loved it. And people who temporarily had crutches loved it. And people who were delivering, you know, on delivery trolley loved it. And, you know, I see every time I go to a street corner with a measly little 3-foot wide curb cut, and there are 10 people standing in front of me, 8 of them want to go down the ramp, not step off the curb.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one example of the idea of automatic doors that helps everybody if your arms are full and you're completely ambulatory. There are also cross disability ideas about like a corridor that is wider than a normal corridor. Well, lets 2 people, you know, in wheelchairs, let's say, travel side by side or in opposite directions. But there's a cross disability benefit as well, because part of depth space idea that I mentioned earlier is that 2 people can walk side by side and have some space and be signing to each other. Somebody with a white cane can be doing a wide sweep and not trip over somebody else. So the list goes on, but that idea of not othering and thinking more broadly about all of the different sort of use conditions in the built environment is sort of the next step that we all need to take.
Amazing, thank you. Anything to add, Paul? Yeah, oh, amen to that. I had an analogy we were talking about earlier. I think that the curb cut reminded me. We look at the physical environment around us and the streets in particular. I'm sure you've all seen the green stripes that are in the streets for bicycles, and there's lights for crossing, and there's crosswalks, and there's pedestrian accommodation. That's what we call a complete street in urban planner parlance. A complete street as opposed to what, streets at one point in time, looking back 1950s, 1960s, Army Corps of Engineers designing streets, with a guide and a manual and trying to get the most efficient movement of cars through an area as possible. Well, it's taken all of this time to get to where we are now, where we realize that everybody's going to use the street. And it's taken activism from the disabled community, it's taken activism from the bicycle community to actually fight and have that place. So when you see these complete streets, that's the result of all this activism. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I think a lot of good responses here. I like the point about our aging population and more people over time. We're going to have a broader range of accessibility needs. But I also like tying that back in to what you were saying about the curb cut effect. And then a lot of the things we talk about here have effects that are positive changes for the built environment for everyone in our community, not just those with different disability and accessibility needs. So thank you. This next question kind of digs into the question of accessibility by design versus trying to add as needed accommodations or retrofits as needs come up. So what is the difference between designing all units to be accessible from the ground up versus trying to do adaptations as people request accommodations? And this one, maybe we get started with Joe.
Money. Let's expand on that a little bit. So a bit more cost effective, cost efficient to include the accessibility in the design and then making an adaptation later. When it's an afterthought, simple modifications like adding a grab bar, for example, drilling holes in the walls is easier to do if the wall has been prepped when it was built from the ground up, as opposed to when you're trying to drill holes in the wall that wasn't prepared. And that's what we mentioned earlier. I think we can do that. It's by adding a sheet of plywood can help in that situation. Something that's really expensive to do when designing. So
yeah. Amazing. Anything to add from your perspective, Luisa?
Yeah, so the buildings that we build as a developer, all of our units are accessible. But part of accessibility means planning for the future, like Joe was saying. So we put backing in the walls of every single bathroom we build. So anyone needs a grab bar, anyone who needs a grab bar right up front has one installed. But if you have a fall and you need one, we had one of my colleagues was pregnant and started to use grab bars, getting up out from the bathroom every day. And so at any time, anyone in our projects can have grab bars installed half an hour with just, the building's mechanic drilling it in, rather than having to open up a wall and then patch it afterwards. And then another thing we think a lot about is adaptability. So everyone has different needs, actually. So how do we design our spaces so that they can fit the person who's going to live there? And a lot of these choices, it's not about adding on a feature, it's about making good choices right up front. So if you think through and make choices at the beginning, it doesn't actually add something, it's just making a better choice at the beginning to put in the back of the walls, for example.
Amazing, thank you. And I think that Kelsey obviously has a lot of great expertise here, given that it was designed from the ground up to be so accessible. And I just want to thank you for your work and for building your first San Jose facility in District 3. Sure, welcome downtown, so thank you. Paul, anything that you'd like to add on this question?
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy, the ADA being that kind of ground floor. And with one of the things that struck me, and this of course happened in a similar way, where with my leg a year ago, I was in a chair for a period of time, and I realized my 1920s house was completely inaccessible. And subsequently, I had friends over who in a chair who can't use their bathroom. And so I think, again, it's not the us, and it's really not the others, it's us, me, my friends, my family. I want to have everybody in my house and be able to accommodate them. So I think you're not just thinking about the resident, you're thinking about anyone who might want to visit them, anyone who wants to have that hospitality. So I want it accessible, so I can have my friends and family and agents with this. So for that reason, it's accessible design. There's more to it than just the resident. It's really about the community.
I love that. I think a lot of good, oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna tag on another little personal story that this makes me think of, which is the idea of grab bars. So in my house, again, in the bathroom, I didn't put in grab bars, but I put in the backing for them before I did tub enclosure. And I didn't need them right away. I'm pretty strong and I can transfer in and out of the tub very easily. I'm not coming from a standing standpoint and stepping over and sort of just transferring. But after a few years, my wife said, could we have a grab bar? And she's completely able-bodied, a strong swimmer and so forth, but she felt unsteady stepping in and out of this nice tall tub that I got, this nice soaking tub. And so it was about safety. And I had put in the needed backing in the wall, not sort of thinking about myself, but it turned out that we are surprised all the time about how these things that we think of as accommodation are actually just daily needs that are good for everyone. So I had to share the little grammar.
No, I love that story. And I think again it speaks to the fact that a lot of these things that we're talking about here are really of benefit to everyone in the community, not just people with different accessibility needs. So thank you for that. I'm also like this notion that a little bit of investment up front can save a lot of money down the line trying to retrofit some of these things. And I think that's a good segue into our next question, which is about costs. So this is really about what is the additional costs, the additional incremental costs of going above and beyond that minimum floor that is set by the ADA and our building codes to build more accessible buildings. And then how should we think as people designing, building buildings about some of the trade-offs between maybe those additional costs versus other goals that the city and other planners might have about things like sustainability. And for this, let's get started with Louise.
Yeah, this is by far the most the top question anyone asks us at the Kelsey, especially in the development world, is what's the cost of all of this? And we have at this point 2 very good data points. We have our project in San Jose here, and our project in San Francisco, which was completed earlier this year. And both of them came out cost comparative. Actually, each of them were slightly less than the average of affordable housing built at the same time in the same places. So we managed to make these incredibly accessible buildings that did not cost anything more than any other affordable housing that was being built. And a lot of that comes from designing up front, working with our consultant to make sure these features are not add-ons at the end. If at the very end of a project you decide to try and add a bunch of accessibility features, that's going to be a lot more expensive. Whereas if it's part of your design process from the beginning, then you can work it through the entire process and it doesn't actually add cost. So there are certain features that will be more expensive to build. The biggest one is the roll-in shower. It's just more expensive to build than a tub, and that's a fact. But as an owner of a project too, that's providing housing to residents, we're required by law to accommodate folks, reasonable accommodations of our residents. And so we also know that a lot more people tend to need roll-in showers than the ADA requires. And so we build into our projects around 3 times as many as what would be required by law. And we find that every single one of those is used by a resident who comes into our building. So we find that building more than is required is actually better as an owner because then we can provide what our residents need. And any accommodations we have to add after the fact, we know will be more expensive. So even just from a cost perspective, it makes sense. But the real key is making sure that we are able to serve our residents' needs, and that adaptability I said before is really key for that. So we make sure that our closets, the shelves are really easily movable. So we don't know who's going to live in a unit. When you're building for a specific person, you can go with their specific needs, but even Eric's previous story, needs also change. But especially when you have a unit that multiple people might live in, you want to make sure you're thinking through lots of different scenarios. So in our project in San Francisco, we have one of the cabinets in the kitchen is actually on casters at wheels. So it can wheel out if you need a roll under counter. If you don't, it just sits under your counter like a normal cabinet. And that means whoever lives in that unit can adapt it to their needs. And all of these things are part of the design process, and the design process has many different touch points. And so as long as you focus, you say this is an important piece of our design, we've shown that you can work it in without it costing more. With our Civic Center project in San Francisco specifically, it's also an incredibly sustainable project. It's part of the C40 cities competition. And so it's also a beacon of sustainability. And we constantly were working to make sure that we weren't compromising one for the other, that both of these things, being incredibly sustainable and being incredibly accessible, were important. And so every time we made a decision, we maybe, chose those two things over other considerations because we decided that it was important.
Amazing. Thank you for all of that. I know as a policymaker, we hear all the time, both from people in the development business, but also city staff, about the high cost of development, the high cost of construction, particularly in California and in the Bay Area, and some of the difficulties that can pose with respect to the building and housing we need. We actually have a study session next week on the San Jose City Council looking at updated studies on the cost of residential development. So hearing from the Kelsey's firsthand experience that it's actually possible, if we are intentional about these choices and we take seriously these design considerations up front, that we can both achieve accessible design that is on par with normal development costs that are typical practices, but while achieving a higher level of accessibility, and also that we are able to do both sustainability in our design and accessibility, again, while achieving cost parity. That's really good to hear. Let's go over to Eric.
So it is true that there are some aspects that do cost more when we're trying to do better, more accessible housing, or any other building type. For decades, I realized that there were many things that cost nothing as well. And so I would have developer clients who were very, understandably very concerned about the bottom line and about the cost of housing in the Bay Area. I decided at one point to not burden them anymore with talking about the accessibility features that I wanted to bring in that didn't cost anything more. I would just do it and not ask for permission and not make a big deal of it. Because once people start thinking about it, and this is certainly the case 10, 20 years ago, once people start thinking about it, they start worrying more. And then they say, well, let's not do that first. Let's get the pricing, and then we'll see if we can add that on. And I'm like, no, don't say add on. And so on the one hand, I think that the architecture community needs to be activists in taking on the responsibility. We don't ask our clients, is this emergency exit stair okay for you? Is it wider? Do you like the way it's done? We're doing it by emergency exit life safety code, and we're making those decisions. That's our responsibility. I feel like we have the same responsibility to make buildings more accessible rather than just meeting, again, the foundational entry level code. And so I've come to the point where I think of this sort of philosophically, that we have a false baseline assumption in cost of housing in particular, when we think about the cost of accessibility. That almost shouldn't even be a phrase, but it still is. But that false baseline is also call it a false economy that we're working under. And we need to sort of shake off those ideas about what it costs to meet the baseline and think about the slightly greater cost and sometimes zero cost of doing better. So we've got to really shift in the entire profession for thinking about the economy. So that's the sort of philosophical side of it. In a practical sense, there are ideas like the sustainable, aspects of the Kelsey Civic Center project. We're meeting those requirements. And when I did a project about 10 years ago in Alameda, it was LEED rated. It's a green building system green building rating system. For multifamily housing, it was rated as a platinum, which is the highest level of green. In the course of doing that, it was my first green project, first LEED rated project. And I saw that many of the things on the LEED green building checklist were things that we had been doing for decades in accessible housing. So it had to do with user, the materials in the room and low off-gassing. And, we thought about it as something that's great for people with multiple chemical sensitivities. But then in LEED, it's recognized as just a healthy building for everybody. Operable windows was something that we focused on, making sure that, buildings are hermetically sealed. You can get natural ventilation that's flexible for people with different needs. But it turns out that's a LEED building requirement as well. We saw all of these different overlaps. And so I now talk to developers about the fact that they can do a 2-for-1 or sometimes 3-for-1 improvement in the design by meeting accessibility and green and sometimes other standards all at the same time. So there's a very practical argument for including these elements, and again, often at little or no cost. And we see that the idea of making improvements for design and inclusion and accessibility winds up being making design improvements, period, full stop. It's just better. So that's sort of the end argument to any of these discussions.
I love that. Thank you. And I really like this concept of kind of trying to reframe what the baseline that we should be aiming for with accessibility is. I don't think that any architects or city planners are sitting around being like, yeah, let's rip out those fire sprinklers. Let's ignore these seismic codes in the interest of, shaving off the dollars. So I think reestablishing a baseline of what we expect when it comes to designing accessibility into our buildings makes a lot of sense. Anything that anyone else would like to add on that, Joe or Paul?
The audience really question?
Yes, that was actually our last scripted question. So we have just about 10 minutes for audience questions, but I can come down with the mics. I'll start over here and we can work our way to the left.
So I don't know if folks can see this, but I'm sitting in one of a process called a Hoyer lift, a patient lift. I'm sitting in the swing part of the Hoyer. Now, my question to you is, this patient lift makes it possible for me to get from bed to chair, chair to bed, bathroom, whatever, right? There's a new device on the market, fairly new device, called the Sure Hand System. So it's a combination, so they can be a unit where you roll around either manually or using a motor operate, or you can have an overhead track, making it possible for those of us who are determined to be independent, as long as we can, to stay as independent as we can by using a self-driven, if you will, using a control for ourselves. There is no sling. You're held up behind. It is interesting because you're held up by two hands, so to speak, that wrap around the middle, and then you have two hooks that hook underneath, and you're in the wind with nothing underneath you. But it makes it possible for you to go from one room to another using an overhead track. Yeah, no kidding. Really amazing stuff. I guess I'm wondering if we can't move towards that as a standard, not as an exception for maybe someone that can afford to use it in a home setting where they can, take out a loan in order to get it, not cheap. But at the same time, it can be made in any number of configurations. So I'm wondering if we can work toward that standard.
Thank you for that question. I'm not sure who on the panel would like to field that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. I think one key piece of it is reasonable accommodation is seen within the development community as like a big thing and quite frankly, a thorn in your side. It's something that we have to do. And we approach it very differently in that we assume we'll do accommodations for people because that's our job as their landlord, is to make sure that their homes are comfortable for them. And so we do that in a few ways. Some of it is just working with our property management companies to approach it that way. Some of it is working directly with our residents to make sure that they feel comfortable asking for that. So we actually, our resident services team, which we call our inclusion concierge, we have 2 full-time resident services people at each of our projects that are open, whose job it is to get to know every resident and help them live the life they need. And so part of that is saying, instead of waiting for a resident to come to us for a reasonable accommodation, we actually give them a list of accommodations we do. You don't need a doctor's note for, just ask. Grab bars are one of them. We've talked about those a lot. Anyone in any of our buildings can just ask, and there's no form that needs to be filled out. There's no paperwork. It just happens. So changing the way we think of the mindset of a building owner is a key component of that. And we also try and build it economically into our system, making sure that we set aside funds for accommodations. So if someone needs something that's more than that's a higher cost item, like what you're talking about, it's not a question of how do we pay for it. No, we actually have a fund, we have a reserve for reasonable accommodations that can pay for that and set up for that reason. So that shifting that mindset as an owner, like our job is to make sure people have what they need in their home is a key component.
Sounds good. I'll quickly read sorry, did you have something to add?
I was just gonna add that, there at the Civic Center project, the Tulsa Civic Center, there is a Hoyer lift, which many people are probably familiar with. It sort of works in a similar way, but it's a mobile version of a lifting system. And there's one that is provided in the common space there. So this is the first time I've ever seen that done. But it's available for people to use in the extensive common spaces if they need it. Also, I'm glad you mentioned the shorehand. We've actually installed those in several projects. And luckily, the way that particular system has changed over the years, it can now be installed without having to plan for any wood blocking in the ceiling. So it can work with any standard construction. It's something that's added on to get you want? I'm not sure offhand. Yeah, but they're very, very sturdy, and they attach to the framing that's in the ceiling. So at every 16 inches on center, there's something to attach to. So they have new track systems that can actually help to get people from their bed into the bathroom, for example, which is the main use of a system like that.
Sounds good. I'm going to really quickly read and then try to answer one of the questions we have in the chat here, which says a large percentage of our most vulnerable homeless population are people with disabilities. What can be done to incorporate inclusionary design for people in emergency interim housing, such as sleeping on Taylor, downtown San Jose, or some of the tiny home sites? I can speak briefly to some of my experience in this area. Some of these facilities are in my district. So the Taylor site, there was some effort to provide a baseline level of accessibility in the tents. The tents have ramps. There's larger tents set aside for people who may have wheelchairs that need to be accommodated. The bathroom facilities that are on site are designed to be accessible. The same is true of the emergency interim tiny home shelters throughout the district and throughout the city. Designed with ramps, with accessible bathroom facilities and laundry facilities, cooking facilities, as well as ramps and storage space in the actual tiny homes themselves. But I think always room for improvement here. The city just recently completed an audit of our homelessness services. And one of the things that came out of that audit was some direction to really look towards reasonable accommodations when we're talking about both building these new facilities and getting people moved in. In the interest of time, I'm going to quickly try to move through 2 more audience questions at least.
I would like to know about biometric door access where you come in, it knows your biometric, and this person needs 30 seconds to a minute for the door to stay open. Then it locks by itself. It could be for bathrooms. So like if you have like biometric data when you log in, I mean, you come into a site, you check in, knows this person needs an emergency. And I mean, it would be private and all like the airport crews get. So we all biometric data for the emergency staff. So they know this person's needs disability, so they can see on the camera, oh, he's stuck in the bathroom. You know, like when he pushes the emergency button, they say their name, and then they know that this person needs this assistance. So it's all done by biometric access control. And you can even program the doors when you check in on the system. Like a minute you need to open, 30 seconds, whether it's the bathroom door. What do you think?
Not sure who on the panel would like to take that one.
I'll say it's amazing what the technology can do these days. And I'm just thinking of an example, getting back to this idea of making an accommodation that makes it better for everybody. In an apartment building where we have 4 or 5 floors, we would create places to put the garbage. And having a chute that has an automatic sensor that can see you coming, get them out, and then you don't touch it well, it will just sense it out, let it go away. That's great for everybody in the building. I mean, if you're carrying 3 bags of garbage and the dog needs, so that's, I think, an example of using the technology to make our lives easier. So curious to see what comes out in the next few years.
And I do know that with different door activators, so one of the things that we like to incorporate in multifamily housing is an outlet next to the top of the door, the entry door, so that somebody can very easily, usually it's going to be the building operator, can plug in a door operator. And then that is only operated by the resident, whether with a push button inside the unit or with their phone or a remote control. And so those can be set, like you're saying, to be timing or a particular resident. Good. And for their needs. Oh, God.
I think we have time for one more.
One more? Okay. Thank you so much for your time and your information. I'm curious in the areas that are common areas. When it comes to it, sometimes there's some competing needs. And so I'm blind with a little bit of like perception. If I walk into a room like this, immediately I'm feeling relief because I'm not hearing the echo of sound bouncing off windows, doors, all of those other things. Light might make a difference. What's under my feet can inform me. So how do you, in your experience, how have you factored in the needs of people with different disabilities? Because I know right away when a place has been designed where my needs as a blind person has been factored in. So I'm curious.
I can tell you a few things we've worked into the Kelsey Civic Center. So in the Kelsey Civic Center, we've thought a lot about how sound travels to the space. We have acoustic felt walls in a lot of our common areas to make it both easier to navigate using acoustics and also make it a more comfortable acoustic environment for people who can get overwhelmed when the acoustics are not designed for. And then we also do think about paving, as you mentioned. Our courtyard in that project has different pavers for different spaces. So if you're using the feel of a paver to understand where you are, the kind of walkways versus the areas to spend time and hang out have different pavers that will feel different to indicate that as well.
Wonderful. And that's something that, make another sort of connection of this idea with better architecture and better design as well, because in that courtyard, it's very interesting to have those different pavers. So it's something that is helpful for somebody who is blind and who's feeling the ground, and they know that, well, this pattern is this area, this other pattern is another area. But something that I'd like to incorporate into even a single family project where I'll use different sized tiles. So maybe a 2 foot by 4 foot big tile floor in the kitchen, and then in a transitional space into a living room, I've changed to like a very small tile. So when we're rolling over it in a wheelchair, you get the other experience. And it's a complete bonus, right? It's just this fun add-on. And I incorporated that into one project in Livermore. And I told the wife who used the wheelchair, but I never apparently told the husband. And so they were in it for a year and I visited and, you know, I mentioned it and he said, I never realized that there was a difference in the feeling of that, but she was like, of course there is.
Yes.
So it's an architectural opportunity to make a more interesting space and we all want.
Thank you.
Not to mention it's also just more beautiful. It visually indicates for people who are using visual cues that spaces are different. So there's all these different layered reasons why this is good for many different people.
Thank you.
Amazing. We were just about in time, but speaking one more final audience question, we'll try to be quick.
Just because my cousin is in a wheelchair and the cost of like the benefit of wheelchair like
Okay, no worries. Maybe we can connect afterwards. Sounds good. I just want to take an opportunity to thank all of our panelists for their time today. And then I will put it back over to Alex for whatever is next in the round.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. For those who are on Zoom, we are going to, like, where's the camera? Somewhere around there. We're going to go to lunch now from 12:30 to 1:30. So for those of you on Zoom, feel free to jump off and come back at 1:30 for our next panel, which is going to be really great. We're going to dive in more to those with lived experience, living in housing, and living with disabilities in housing, as well as the parents and caregivers who support them. So that will be our third panel. And then our final panel will shift gears a little bit from housing and moving into public spaces and businesses and how to make those inclusive for people with disabilities. So for those in the room, feel free to grab lunch. If you need to go outside, go ahead. We'll get to 1:30 and then we'll reconvene for our next panel. So thank you so much. So in our last panel, we talked about housing from the people who have designed and operated that housing. Now we get to talk with the people who have been living in housing for folks with disabilities and the folks who are caregivers or parents of people. And we're going to hear that great perspective. We've got an hour for this panel, and then we will very quickly transition into our last panel at 2:30, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. So we may be finished today a little quicker than 3:45. We'll see. But we definitely want to get a good conversation going here. Again, there are bathrooms around the corner if anyone needs them. And feel free to grab more water or anything else. We do still have our quiet room available. If anyone needs the quiet room, feel free to pop around the corner to that. So I'm going to turn it over now to our moderator. Looks like everyone's about settled. Thank you. And we have Maria from Parents Helping Parents who will be moderating today's panel.
Hey, welcome everybody. Great to be here today. And thanks so much for organizing a really important topic. I'm with Parents Helping Parents. We support families who have loved ones with disabilities, and housing is one of the most challenging resources to secure for our families. Thank you for doing this. We'll do some quick introductions. We start. We need you right here. Let's start with Alicia. Here you go.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Creel, and I am the program manager for the resident coordination team at Housing Choices. I have been with Housing Choices for 10 years. I started back in 2015, and I have been able to support a lot of residents in maintaining stable housing and making sure that all of their leases and compliance and everything is doing well so that they can continue to keep stable housing. Oh, thank you.
I received the bill I'm an advocate for people with disabilities here in Santa Clara County.
Hi, my name is Janie Whiteford. I wear a turn it off. I didn't turn it on. All right. Let's start again. Janie Whiteford, and I wear a couple of hats. Here in Santa Clara County, I sit as an advocate on the IHSS Advisory Board for in-home support services. And statewide, I am the executive director of SECA, California IHSS Consumer Alliance, which is a statewide organization of advisory boards. And we currently have 30 counties who are members of our organization.
Hi, my name is Mary Pizzo. I have a 34-year-old daughter with an intellectual disability and epilepsy, and so our journey has been to find stable housing for her.
Hi, my name is John Roxanne. I'm a vice president at home. I also got San Andreas Regional Center. And good obvious. I go see consumers.
Wonderful.
Just quickly for John Robinson mentioned that he is the vice president of the board of directors for Silicon Valley Independent Living Center, agency that I work at, and he also works at San Andreas Regional Center as a counselor.
Okay. We have question number 1, which is a very question. And to make it more difficult, we ask our panelists to restrict their comments to 2 minutes. So this is a tough one. You ready? We got, what challenges do you see in securing and maintaining housing for people with disabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the biggest challenges that we see with a lot of our residents is that they have cold feet. I fear moving into a lot of these partner properties because they're so uncertain as to what it's going to look like once they move into the partner property on their own, or what funding is going to look like as to what they're going to be getting. We do have a lot of residents who do take this opportunity as in hopes of being able to live independently and being able to receive all the support that they need. So they do require a big, strong circle of support in order to be able to take that big, great achievement.
We covered a lot of territory with that. Wonderful. But anyway, beyond having the surround sound people supporting you, and believe me, I got some great folks stepping in to help me out. It's having the proper resources on site. So in other words, having the units have what people need. So it's not just having the very basic ADA requirement. ADA should be considered the cement, the ground. And you don't go below the ground. But that doesn't mean you can't go above the ground. So going beyond ADA to me means looking at what things are that are not there right now. So universal design is not really known, but it's basically covering everything that you need when, you know, from cradle to grave, basically. And being able to transition the home to meet the needs of the individual as they get older. And believe me, at 60, realizing that you need more help and more assistance and more things and tools and resources. Sometimes it's hard to learn, but at the same time, they should be there whether or not you need them or not.
Thanks, Christine. I have to laugh when she says aging with a disability. I'm here to tell you is a challenge. We're still here, and I think it's great, but
And I also wanted to mention that disability is a huge range. And we have to take that into consideration. That number one, what you might need as a 20-year-old person with a disability is not what you are going to need when you're my age at 81. Also, what you might need as far as your services and supports. Some people need a lot and some people don't need as many. So I think when you look at housing, you have to take those things into consideration. But looking at what we have now, we don't have enough. It's too expensive. And those people that want to live independently cannot afford it, which is an absolute sin, even though they might be able to and have the resources available to help them live independently. And I got to tell you, folks, it's only going to get worse.
Thanks, Katie. As a parent, for me, the troubling part was I couldn't see anything until it was available, which meant that you had to jump on the property or the housing. And that made it really tricky because I didn't know how to foreshadow it with my daughter. I didn't know what to be looking for until after she was in it. And then we discovered this is not a good fit for her.
As for me, I'm an individual and I have a car. For my property to be available to be have a close space I can to have like a place to for my car, for my groceries, that my good like upstairs. And challenge.
Question 2, are there any emergent issues that have come up in the past year that you think everyone should know about?
Some of the emerging issues that we've seen at our partner properties, and this has been throughout all of them, is that we've seen that residents are a little bit more hesitant to work with the property manager who doesn't have a sense of awareness as to the needs that they need, because they are not able to approve of their requests, such as reasonable accommodations or anything that is needed. So we do see that they need a lot of people who are in their support team who can advocate for them. And also a lot of our new partner properties, we have some issues when it comes to evacuation plans and other things throughout the property that are not designed ahead of time. So we find a lot of times we have residents who are living there and we find ourselves in these situations and we have to come up with these plans and ways to support them and just have their needs better supported.
Actually brought up an interesting thing. In my facility that I've been living in for so long, we've never once had an evacuation drill. And the interesting thing, I've been there about 30 years or so. And we have outside belts and alarms to fire. We don't have inside strokes. Hopefully with this renovation that's happening right now, inside and out, that will change. But it's standards, it's requirements, it's activation. We have never had a drill. I don't know if there is an actual evacuation plan. And with those upstairs, there are no elevators. Yes, I can't talk. In anywhere in my complex, there are about 12, 14 two-story units, and upstairs are available only by stairs. Climb up and down, so yeah.
I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the big bad coming forward. And I think that that's what I'd like to look at. And I think it's going to do a lot of damage to a lot of what we're looking at now. HUD will be cutting back on their funding tremendously. I think that, we have to look at that, the money coming down from HUD into our communities and how there's gonna be a lack of money to build any affordable, accessible housing. I'm worried about there being enough, Section 8 housing opportunities available to folks. I'm worried about the services that our folks need. I know IHSS, the organization that I'm most aligned with, is really going to be cut terribly, and I'm worried about that. So I think for all of us, and all of this reflects housing and the needs that our folks with disabilities are going to need. And I really worry, I'm advocating and asking you all to advocate. The sin of it is that the feds are going to cut to the state's going to have to cut to the counties, and nobody, neither the state nor the counties, have the funds to backfill what the feds are not sending down. I think when the rubber meets the road and all of us realize how awful these cuts are going to affect us, changes will happen because we'll all rise up and say enough already. But I think initially we really have to be on our toes and be ready to look at how housing and all of the services that our folks need are going to take a dig.
From my point of view, the city of San Jose during the pandemic made a change to their development plans. The change in particular is that the developer does not have to provide any on-site parking. So if you are a person who has a mobility issue, or if you're a caretaker for someone in the housing project, you may not be able to park right by the housing. You may have to park a couple blocks away. And as they allow the developers to have narrower lot lines and smaller sidewalks, it makes mobility to and from this affordable housing that they're so anxious to put up become even less accessible than it is today.
I deal with I'm going on point and I think going to report particularly also the fund that is from the country, always citizens like doing things. And more pointing to you have to make a change.
Actually, you can give John the mic. We have another set of questions. Start John that in the other direction. So here we go, John. How can staff support you?
Okay, I'm going to the question.
John wrote the question, so he's got the answer.
The town city precautions the staff ask me what consistent with more time people assume what they want to do with it. Because you ask the person when you see them for them, wait for the response. You have to work with, for example, I've asked you, can you help me with one question?
Thank you. Okay, Amy, in the design of disability structures, how can designers consider the emotional and psychological issues when they design individuals with disabilities?
That was mine. Maybe. No, I think this is really important. I remember so clearly when I was injured. I was injured in a car accident like 40 odd years ago. And did my rehab work at Valley Medical Center. I was already in a house, married with 3 children in a house. And they kept telling me, and I have a 2-story house. And they were looking at what am I going to do? Here I'm in a wheelchair. The bedrooms are all upstairs, blah, blah, blah. And the social workers and physical therapists and OTs, you have to move. And they never took into consideration the fact that I was a mom with 3 kids and we had lived in this neighborhood for how many years. And I finally said to them, you are not looking truly at what I need socially. I need to be here because my kids are here. My support group, my neighborhood, my friends are here. They're the ones that are going to support me. I cannot move. So we had to figure out a way to adapt my house so that I could stay there. I also did not want my kids to have to change schools. That was incredibly important. They had enough to adapt to without having to find new friends in a new neighborhood and in a new school. So I really want folks to understand that the architects, the designers, that when you look at building something, you have, especially for one person, or you're adapting an apartment or a condo, what exactly does that person need? And when we redid my kitchen, I was so lucky to have an architect that we walked through everything. And we were able to actually say, okay, this is what I need. I need a cutout here so I can get to this thing. I need a cutout here so I can get to the cooktop. I need pull-outs boards so that when I take something out of the oven that's hot, I can put it right here. I mean, it was a process, and the architect had never done that before. But they were very willing to work with me to make that happen. So I think that the builders and the architects, the same thing with the ramps in my yard too, that I needed somebody to really talk with me about what I needed. And then, it's not, we're going to provide something for you. It's, I'm going to tell you what you need to provide for me.
Okay, Christine, in your experience, how can universal design best support people with disabilities? I think it's awesome. Yes.
Yes, Debbie. Anything?
Yeah,
That's
I can hear you.
One of the big. My ears are clogged, so you have to. Universal design, whatever. Having universal design baked into the whole thing, making it possible for someone like myself who moved into my apartment over 30 years ago, from a young woman into slightly a little bit middle-aged woman of 60. And the next question is, can I go beyond that? So having universal design will make it possible for me or anyone to change the configuration and the tools available to me to meet my needs where it's at. So it goes beyond the handrails at the toilet or having a roll under sink. It is looking at having the roll-in shower baked in at the beginning, not halfway through. And here's the weird part. For example, not having universal design, having to say to my manager, I needed a combination. I now need a roll-in shower rather than a tub because I was saving those roll-in showers for people that really needed it. After hauling myself in and out of the tub for any number of years, I figured for me with this, I need it. So having that baked in the beginning really would have made it a lot easier rather than having to go back and
Well, these are great questions, I think. Louise has got another good one. Beyond the physical space, the resident moves in and has to interact with the systems and the routines that come with living in the community. What kind of process-related challenges have you seen residents encounter?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of residents encounter a lot of challenges with what's available to them within the property. And again, that goes back to what everybody kind of mentioned, accessibility within the property. We have had to advocate for a lot of our residents who are in wheelchairs or have mobility issues with getting certain things done to the property itself so that they can access opening a door, getting in the elevator, certain things like that. So within their unit, we see challenges such as kind of like what they had mentioned earlier, you know, having some covers taken out from the bottom of the sink so that they can access it easier, having walk-in showers, doing reasonable accommodations for grab bars, anything like that, but we do notice it throughout the entire property. And the common areas, you know, how can those be useful for everybody and how can those be utilized on a day-to-day basis? So those are kind of some of the things that we noticed.
Hey, John, we're coming back to you. What are the best ways for you to make your home accessible and easy for you to get to the things you need?
For me, I move around with a walk. I need open space. But my caretaker, he already my business. I do move out more. I'm a good one. I okay, but I do nothing.
Yeah.
So my daughter is 4'10". And when she moved into her studio apartment with an assistant to help her, all the storage cupboards were over 5 feet 8 inches. So she couldn't use any of those. The to hang clothes up, the wire rack was about 5 feet 4 inches. Again, she needed somebody to help her hang up her own clothes, which she had been doing since she was a child. And it made her feel like she wasn't independent. Here she is in an apartment and she couldn't do the most basic things. Microwave oven was up under a counter. She couldn't reach it. She couldn't open it because you had to press the button on the handle. So back to your point and your point, it's from the person centric. And if I look around this room, no two of us look alike. We're not the same height. We don't have the same, leg length and arm length and head length. I mean, we're all very different. And so making a bunch of apartments that will be low income and easy to move into does not really provide accessible living for everyone.
Jamie, could you share with us, when you got injured, what did you have to consider about design so you could move forward with your life?
Well, I was in a wheelchair, that was new. And how am I gonna get in my house? And how am I gonna get up to my bedroom? Not to mention, how am I gonna get from my chair to my bed? So it was a huge, huge learning curve and a huge adaptation. I was fortunate enough that we were able to financially accommodate my needs.
And my husband's company was unbelievably generous with us. Not everybody has that. And I've done a lot of counseling, rehab counselor by profession. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that don't have that benefit. And so the question is, where do they get the funds to make this happen? And I don't have the answer. Unfortunately, I know there's some organizations there with rebuilding, I forget that rebuilding organization will come in and do some invitations for you. We really have to, we're going to have to really reach out to our faith communities to ask them to start stepping up in a lot of different areas when these funding cuts come, to ask them to help. And I think another thing that is, I've done a ton of presentations lately on aging with disability. And I think that the thing that we really have to look at is that, you know, you can have a developmental disability. That's one thing. And then you have to age into disability. And people that age into disability, they're not going to tell you they have a disability. They have a condition of aging a lot of times. But that whole stigma of disability is there. But they still are going to need those accommodations. And teaching them to ask for them is a huge issue. Because the bottom line here is if we don't keep people in their own homes any way we can, they're going to end up going back to the hospitals or going back into nursing homes, which is way, way more expensive than any resources we can give them in most cases to remain in their own home. So all of you out there, tell those seniors, reach out, get the help you need, go to your ILC, go to the, resources for independent, for the SourceWise now. Reach out to those agencies that are there to help you. It's not going to kill you.
Okay, Christine. Okay, hold on one moment, Christine. Let me ask the question first. You want to make a comment first, then I'll. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing to what Jenny was saying. Beyond the actual paying of a company to make the renovations, etc., finding resources as in adaptive technology that can go along with the modifications in your home, contacting an independent living center like SLT. We have an AT closet that people can try out. Look at things, take tires, you try before you buy it, this kind of thing. Now when you know what you have and what you need, and we can even help you develop what you need. Listen to me, I'm not on staff, but I still represent David.
By the way, in a few moments, we will have time for audience questions and answers. So for those of you that are on Zoom, feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll try to work them in. And for those of you who are here, you're almost your turn. Okay, so Christine, question for you. You had the insightful comment earlier that ADA is just the floor. You can do better than that. Tell us what developers overlook when they only deliver basic ADA, and how does design fall short for future residents with disabilities?
In a way, I think they failed to imagine. So what I mean by that is they build to the basic requirement of the ADA, but they don't do an Imagineer type of look at whatever it is they're trying to build. So it's 1+ or 2+ instead of the basics. The other thing that I'd like to say is each and every one of you, as you design these structures, think of it this way. At one point of your life, disability will creep up on you. Disability is one factor that crosses every spanner known to man. Race, ethnicity, economics, you name it, you got it, Toyota. It doesn't matter. It could be a car accident. It could be you're climbing and you fall. It could be an illness. Any number of things could happen to you. I wish I could remember the exact quote. It's not the plan to failure, it's a failure to plan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Louisa, as many of us have heard from the panel, there's support needs that go along with the physical space. Could you tell us, for residents who have support staff who visit them to help them with basic services, what types of design considerations would improve their experience at
And I think part of it was kind of touched a little earlier from someone else, but it is definitely parking. So we have noticed that there is not enough parking spots or spaces for the amount of residents that are there. A lot of the properties or the developments are also planned out where they don't think that a resident won't have a car, so they don't think that they will need one. However, they do have 24-hour support staffs. They do have ILS, SLS who come and support them throughout the day or throughout the week. And they do require a safe space to be able to get to and from their unit to the car. A lot of them also do grocery shopping or other such activities outside of their unit that require transportation and for them to be able to get safely there. We do run the risk of residents going to where the staff member has to park, and sometimes surrounding areas are not the safest, or there's also a lot of traffic that is near those properties. So as they're getting to and from the car to the property, they do run the risk of an accident happening or something happening to them as they're doing that. So one of the things that we try to do is that we try to get the residents a reasonable accommodation for them to get a parking space, even if they don't own a car themselves. But it's mostly for that specific aspect that they do have staff that drive and need to support them with what they require. When we are not able to get specific parking spaces for each resident, we do try to advocate for them to have a certain number set aside of parking spaces that are available for staff to kind of switch in and out of, so that residents can utilize them and be able to have a closer and safer space for pickups and drop-offs.
So in your ideal world, how many parking spaces would there be for universal design?
That's a great question. The ideal and what I would wish that it could be possible is definitely 1 to 2 per unit. And the reason for that is because a lot of times we do have residents who have more than one staff members, or they also have parents who come and check in on them. And when their parents are not able to access their child or, their individual because they have staff, I don't think that it's really fair to the residents themselves. So in the ideal world, I think that 2 parking spots per actual unit would be beneficial, would be great.
And 2 spaces either on the curb, at the curb, or in an actual stall for paratransit.
Good.
We're getting some +1s up here. Okay. Questions from the audience? What do we have here?
My question is, why not let's get these smaller homes? Oh, sorry. Going sorry. Okay. This is a situation that I have come across. For instance, I live in Saratoga. I want to stay in my city. I don't want to go to downtown San Jose to this apartment with 50 people. I would like my own place. Why not have funding for these small homes? There's this an autistic adult, Bobby's World. They built a small home for $20,000 on a parent's property. You could have 2 rooms with support, whatever. Live in your city. I don't want to have to move someone to San Jose, Sacramento, out of the city. It's too expensive. I mean, why do we have West Valley College? Why do we want them to commute from downtown San Jose? I know you have Casa Believe, you have John Stewart Company far away. That's denying them the access. They want to live next to their parents. They don't feel comfortable going to a city with high crime rates. Let's end that and let's allow people to live in Saratoga, Los Gatos. I mean, I understand the money financial, but I'm saying a lot of these parents have the money, a lot of them don't, but even still, even if they can't afford Saratoga, you have the College of Adaptive Arts. Why don't we build homes, college campuses next to the College of Adaptive Arts on their campus where they study?
I can answer that.
Excellent.
Unfortunately, it's a zoning issue. And the cities, you've got to advocate, because the city's number one is a NIMBY issue, not in my backyard.
No.
Number two is a zoning issue from the Board of Supervisors. Number three is, I am happy to say, I think with these ADUs that are going in, a lot of the cities are, you know, backing away from those ordinances, say no ADU, that they're more and more allowing the ADUs to come in. But it's an issue at the local level, and it's something that you're gonna have to fight individually.
She kind of stole my thunder. I was going back to the ADUs. Because he had auxiliary dwelling units. Are going to make it possible for folks to put in units that they may not already have on their site. I actually visited one a couple of years ago. That was a converted garage. And it wasn't the world's greatest, but it wasn't the world's worst. It was one of the brand new model units. So I had to start somewhere, and I will say that particular unit was not ADA, so I had to kind of keep in from the front door, or there was a step, other cool things. So there was that.
Another thing I think we're looking at too is modular units.
Yeah.
They were coming right out of the factory already ready to go. And I think that's a wave of the future.
Exactly.
Our job is to make sure that those units are accessible.
Yes.
And the ordinance are covering it.
You had a comment, there was a gal back here who I think wanted to.
No. Just wanted to add, Proposition 19, which was passed recently, has been causing a lot of concerns for the parent community who have built out additional space for their child to live and want their child to inherit their property, but their child, if they inherited it under this new proposition, child gets new property taxes, which could be 20 to 40,000 a year, which on $1,000 a month in SSI is not doable. So keep your eye out for activity on Prop 19 and how it affects inheritance to people with disabilities. I don't know when it's coming out. Does anyone know when that's coming out?
Yeah.
The fight's kind of happening now, so keep your eyes on it.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Richard, and then I'll come over here.
I was at a hearing last night virtually with the city of Cupertino in supporting 40 low-income housing units. 19 of them are for individuals with intellectual disabilities. I was so disheartened listening for 3 hours, the negative feedback, the stigma of people with disabilities shouldn't be there. Taking it to the extreme, they were so small-minded. I was one of maybe 7 when I counted in support of the project because they need it now. I've worked with parents who have an adult child with a disability. The number one fear they have, what's going to happen to my child? Where's he or she going to go? Nursing homes are not homes. That's where they put them, but they're not homes. And I told the city, you have an obligation, because one of the things that lacks with cities and counties is they don't build enough affordable housing for the low and very low income population. It's always the middle population. It's always below market rates, called BMR units. That's not affordable to the low and very low income population. They get screwed out. So all of us need to educate our local elected officials where you live, where you work, about the need for more affordable housing with the low population. This is why we have homelessness. People with disabilities living in the street. I'm a former advocate helping individuals out of homelessness. You know, an individual with epilepsy, connecting him back to with the regional center system, reconnecting with the family, reconnecting support services, reconnecting with in-home support services so that he can live in his own place. The first thing he said to me was, Richard, I don't want to live in a group home. My response was, you tell that to the service coordinator. And if your service coordinator doesn't listen, you file a grievance. Work your way up. Use for state fair hearing. That is your leverage to get what you want to maintain your independence the way you want it, not what the service coordinator thinks. The assumption, oh, they're all going to go in group homes. Group homes not for everyone.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for being at that hearing last night. There's a saying among housing advocates, housing policy is all local. It's all local. Yes, Jamie did talk about HUD and that there's going to be significant cuts to HUD funding. And so there is federal money that supports affordable, accessible housing being built, but the policy decisions of what that housing is going to look like is made at the local level. And we all have the opportunity and responsibility to make sure that the local decisions reflect what we want to see in our community and supporting the members of our community. So keep that in mind and pay attention like Richard did and attending the council hearing to talk about what that housing complex and the accessibility and affordability should look like. Does anybody on the panel also want to comment before we take the next question?
I just wanted to add one thing, sorry to steal your thunder. It should also be remembered that housing is a basic human right.
Okay, we have another question here from Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yes. Hi, I'm Michelle. I work at Satellite Affordable Housing Associates. I'm a low-income housing developer. I'm really curious about this question about like parking and providing like accessible mobility, particularly when we're thinking about building low-income housing for folks with disabilities, which, you know, the kind of existing funding landscape really incentivizes kind of like high density development of affordable units in usually infill lots, which, you know, have very limited kind of square space. So it becomes like a zero-sum game of, you know, if you provide more parking, then you have to take out that square footage that you would otherwise devote to units. So I'm just wondering kind of like what would be your advice to, you know, low-income developers like me who are trying to kind of deliver like high density housing close to transit that's accessible. But, you know, we just don't have the space to provide all those parking.
Hi, I go to a lot of development meetings for different plans and properties. And I have to point out that it's a fallacy to think in the state of California, people don't want to own cars. The idea that young people don't have a car, don't want a car, oh, they can Uber, that is simply not true. People own cars to get around. And I'm not sure if you understand this, but the person who drives for Uber, they have a car. Where are they parking it? And the idea that that Uber driver can pull up in a lane and stop their car and put on their flashers and wait for somebody to try and come down in a slow elevator and out a door and along a narrow sidewalk and squeeze in between cars? No, they can't do that to get into the Uber. So the idea that I think developers need to understand is that you need to provide on-site parking, whether you put it under the building and you're going to have to charge for it. I understand you have to charge. I get that. But the idea that you don't need to provide it because you're a transit hub, I'd like you to be on the 4th floor of an apartment in a wheelchair, make your way down, get on the street, cross the street, get onto the next street, cross that street, do it 2 more times before you get to Diridon Station. And I think you'll find you're exhausted and sweaty and that it didn't really meet your needs.
Yes, I have friends in some more development. They build houses up. I mean, generally, they need to build more wider, so it can be more parking for, good, sometimes parking is too small, too small.
Yep. There.
More parking.
A question over here. Oh, good comments. Okay.
So going back one step, I'm sorry, going back one step. Going back one step, talking about the Uber. But now Uber right now is wheelchair accessible. Ubers are usually driven with their own cars. Nobody's gonna buy a lift equipped or ramp equipped van in order to provide a service. So that has to be provided somehow. It should be contracted with the local paratransit company. We're still fighting that. But anyway, and JD and myself, and you met Joe and a couple of other folks. No, they use lift equipped vans, ramp equipped van. It's not just having the space, it's having extra space. Having the space to drop the ramp or drop the lift. Being able to get out and off of that lift and off of that ramp. So you're looking at somewhere between 5 to 8 feet beyond the van in order to make sure you have enough room to get in and out of the van itself.
Okay, Catherine.
Hi, something, I know someone who lives out at the Kelsey Air Station and they were saying when I last talked to them that there aren't enough spaces at the building for everybody who has a mobility gap. And so that person was having to park off-site several blocks away. So that's an example. Also, I lived in an affordable housing complex and IHSS said that they were unable to serve me because I cannot provide secure on-site parking for my caregiver, and they felt unsafe around the people who hung around outside the building, who were tenants and guest of tenants, and I have no authority to make them stop smoking in the hallways.
So for those of you who don't know what IHSS is, we provide in-home support services. And so without IHSS, person with high support needs cannot live independently. Maybe a time for one more comment or question.
And then let's see if we have anybody on the Zoom that also has a question as well.
There's
one more in the room.
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat. Okay, thanks for looking. My eyes aren't that good with this. I appreciate you.
I sit back.
So I actually have a comment to the developers as well. I used to work at IHSS, and while you guys do provide for the most part disability parking or the blue spot parking, if even having 1 or 2 parking spots for specifically IHSS workers, for people who are nurses, like we provide police parking for an officer who wants to take their lunch break, but we can't provide somebody whose profession is to be there for somebody in need. I absolutely love that needs to be addressed. They do need a spot that they can go. even if, if it's just the IHSS worker, it doesn't have to be at the front of the building, but at least accessible to where they can get to their job or assist in times of late night need, which has happened on multiple occasions.
Michelle, would you like to make a final
Yeah, I can
comment?
make a final.
I'm coming. I'll meet you.
I'll bring it my final comment has to do with just kind of this reality of struggle of space, right? There's a concept called eco-ableism, and it's embedded in our environmental codes, things that we do that are called to the individual, like banning straws. And Alice Wong, may she rest in peace and power. Yeah. She had a saying of suck at ableism because to her that banning of the straw harmed her more than anything else. So there's a need for developers and planners to learn more about ADA, to learn more about disability, to convene panels of people that have this lived experience, and not just my lived experience, but somebody with low vision, somebody who's deaf, somebody who, and I qualify as one of those high support needs people, which I may not present that way, but I do. I rely on in-home supportive services for my life. So, but it's the other piece is tied into that. My question or comment is that we also need to train the property management companies more thoroughly. Yeah, because I'm currently struggling for reasonable accommodation with parking. I have a ramp van. They say they don't assign parking, therefore I can't have an assigned space. But what they did was they utilized their power to claim that they were filing their ADA accommodation process when they never really filed it to start with. Right. They made an internal office decision and they never bumped it to the compliance team. I caught them on that, but there is no protection for me as an individual to navigate this situation. Once upon a time in the ILCs and the parent things, there were these supports, right? There were the legal people that could help. Because I'm sorry, I can't always self-advocate. Oh. Right. I can't solve the problems that are universal as an individual. I need more power with me. And that's also part of why we wanted this event. I think this event, part of the power of this event is because we all come together and we have this merging of things, and it's beautiful. And I'm really grateful for that. But train everybody.
All right, we got a last question of the day for our panel. And then we have to, I guess we're changing over to the next panel. The last question of the day is to our wise panelists. As you look at housing and design, what gives you hope?
Well, for one thing, my hope is to keep fighting for our rights, keep fighting for housing, and keep showing up as I can see me because the coalition, other groups, and organizing. Holding advocacy, the good advocacy, yes, we more to come together to fight what need, and I couldn't say housing is the right.
Yeah. What gives me hope is my daughter, who absolutely advocates for herself. She just doesn't take shit from anybody. And I'm going to give her a lot of credit because she's taught me how to become more of an advocate.
We're all going to be on the same theme, I think. It's the advocacy issue. And I just really hope that we can educate our young folks with disabilities, our teenagers, that we really need to do. I mean, a lot of us that have been in this business a long time are getting older, getting tired. We've done it a long time. And we need to educate our young folks. And I think our young folks have had a great ride because there are a lot of them that are working. We paved the way. And they've had a lot of good things happening for them. And I don't think they realize what it used to be like. And we need to educate them that they need to keep it going.
And what's interesting with that thing, I've got it. So you said, there you go. And what's interesting with that, Jamie, is that none of like you, having grown up in a pretty exclusive school for people with disabilities, Cheltenham School, which the building is built there, but the population is very different than what I grew up in. Having that network, having that family like I have over at SNLC, still to this day, helps me move forward. And the thing that has been mentioned here, and I want to mention again, self-advocacy is great, advocating for others is great. Having allies is crucial. There are a lot of you out here that do not have disabilities yet. I hope you never encounter it, God willing. But if you do, you're going to need the supports. And building that network now will make it easier for the future. And for God's sake, guys, in 2025. Don't you think we need to think even further into the future?
Something that gives me hope is seeing how many people always come together to advocate for each other. It's at every event that I go to, nobody's afraid to speak up and address and say the things that they feel that needs to be brought up and what needs to have more attention to the situation. So that's something that really gives me hope, seeing how many residents are able to advocate on their behalf and gather other people to advocate with them. So.
Okay, this is wonderful. Can we have a huge round of applause? I've really been inspired by your comments around advocacy and parking and universal design and going beyond the ADA. So thank you for setting such a beautiful vision. We are going to adjourn for a few minutes while we reset the stage, and we'll be starting to have food, Alex.
As soon as we can.
Okay.
You want that last drink?
Yeah, folks need to use the bathroom really quick while we're changing out the panel. If we could bring our final panelists and moderator up, that would be great. Hey, Michelle. Thanks for being here. This is okay.
You're not going to get it over.
If anyone in the room is feeling just a little bit hungry, there's still more food, don't feel bashful. And if you think you might be hungry later, now's the time to get some to go if you're walking out. So feel free to take some to go for anyone who would like some food. We don't want to take any with us, so everyone please grab the food if you can.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually. I was just always very comfortable. I walked like a basic text about
Yeah. Some stuff out. Yeah, it's funny because the four that I hired from and I didn't realize people were reading. Not the one down the street. So that's why I was like, yeah, I mean, again, I don't
Richard, sorry. What was that meeting? We had 7 jail from. That's very. Yeah. When it's council members. I spent 3 hours on that meeting. I get to. Yeah. It's there's a way to open.
Yeah. It was going through my head.
So my hope would be.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I know it now.
So,
I am actually excited. I don't have a car yet, but
Finally on. Okay, everyone, looks like we've got our panel on stage, ready to roll. And there will be some more time to chat with people afterwards if there's anyone you want to have more conversations with. So I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Lily Guggenheim, or Lily. Lily's good today. Okay. So Lily's going to take us away for the next 45 minutes. We'll be in this panel, and then we'll do a little wrap up. Maybe we'll ask folks a little bit about what they learned, some takeaways. And we will talk about any next steps anyone has or any advocacy plugs that anyone wants to make. So thank you all for being here. Again, please get some more food or coffee if you need an afternoon pickup. And we'll turn it over to this panel. We've been talking about housing. Now we get to talk about public spaces, parks, businesses, other places that we also want to make inclusive for folks with disabilities. So without further ado.
Thank you, Alex. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. We'll share mine. You guys will share mine.
Yeah.
I'm Lily. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know there's been several really meaningful panels today. We're gonna wrap it up by talking about our third spaces. So not our homes, and not our schools, but that third place where you go to find enjoyment and community. So we're going to be talking about parks, coffee shops, libraries, and anything in that pattern. I've got 3 really amazing panelists sitting next to me today, and I'm going to let them say a few words about themselves, but specifically in the context just to kind of get us started on what brought you into the field of accessible design. And we'll start with starting on my left.
Hi, I'm Claudine. I'm a parent and also an advocate for people with disabilities. My daughter is 31 years old. She has a rare condition called the Smith-Magenis syndrome, which falls into the autism spectrum. And she's very verbal, sociable, with an outgoing personality. And we really want to consider opportunities for people with different abilities in the workplace.
Hi, can you hear me? Switch it up. Not. Right.
My name is Karen Krolewski. I'm a landscape architect, and I design for multifamily housing. So I do some affordable housing design. So today's discussion was really helpful for me to hear some feedback about things doing right, things I can do better. I also do K through 12 design, and I also do playground design. So I've been asked today here because I'm the designer for the Rotary Play Garden in San Jose, which is kind of known as one of being the first all-inclusive playgrounds for the Bay Area. And I started working on that project 15 years ago. We've completed phases 1 and 2. Which was the final phase. And the project was really initiated by Julie Matsushima, who was a Rotarian. And she wanted the project to happen because she had twin grandchildren, and one had cerebral palsy. So she started advocating for adaptive swings to be installed in playgrounds. And then when there was an opportunity for the Rotary Club to do a centennial project, she was the leader on that. So when I came to the project, she had developed like a 40 thing in the playground. And so we were sort of off and running with that. And the project was really an eye-opener for me. Just really, just able to kind of dream up and imagine like what it would really take to be an all-inclusive playground. There was also like a lot of great working with other advocates along the way for designing the playground. So it was a real community effort, I would say.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Lamb, and I am the founder of Andy's Cafe. When my son, Andy, was diagnosed with autism at 2.5, there's this one question that every parent with a child with disability that asks this question, which is, what's going to happen to him, or who's going to take care of him when we transcend? And so that this always has stuck on, my mind all this time. And a couple of the questions is, can he be independent? Can he take care of himself? Right? And one of the reports that I read during this journey was a Harvard report that said that 85% of the adults with ASD are unemployed. Yet during COVID, all these restaurants were saying, I can't find enough workers to work here. Yet there's this untapped workforce saying, please hire me, give me an opportunity. So I was really disappointed to see that report and saddened to see that report. And it's been my mission to create this cafe and employ from the neurodivergent community and give them working opportunities.
Can you hear me? There we go. Thank you so much to all of you. I'll add to my sister has cystic fibrosis and cerebral palsy, which is what brings me here today. And I was one of the original advocates for the Rotary Play Garden, which is what Karen worked on. So it's very exciting to be on the stage with all of you. I'm going to toss it back over to Karen now, because I wanted to start with your perspective as an architect. Most of the times when we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about ramps, elevators, making sure the doors were wide enough. But we wanted to take it a step further and kind of learn about those lesser known or overlooked elements of inclusive design that takes accessibility to that next level.
So with the Rotary Playground project and the projects that I've worked on since, first, I just want everyone to be aware that the current code for ADA access in play areas is pretty minimal. It's the base level. And it basically all it says is, it talks about accessible pathways to and throughout the play area. And then it talks about, for each activity type that you provide in the play area, that needs to be accessible when that activity is on a ground level. If you have elevated components, only 50% of those need to be accessible to those components. But beyond that, there's no code out there or law or ASTM code that says what should you provide that play space? What's really going to provide a meaningful place to be and for children to want to be there to play in it and to be able to use it. When I started to work on the play garden, again, as I mentioned, Julie had developed like 40 parameters that she wanted to see in the space. And beyond that, we went about trying to figure out how to make each and every element accessible and each and every element meaningful. So some of the goals that we implemented were just multiple access modes to each element or ways to try to get onto an activity. If you look at the Play Garden project, you'll start to see that it's not, sometimes it's not apparent, but it was designed very intently into each activity in the play space. We also try to provide for a sensory diversity. And so that's kind of seen more in phase 2 with the nature elements. We had musical elements and other surfacing materials that we incorporated into the play area. And then we also really strive to provide very challenge levels is how we see it. Knowing that not every person has the same level of mobility or same level of needs as another person. We also provided quiet retreat spaces. So sometimes that's, it could be something that's enclosed, but it could be another space that's part of the play area itself. We also worked at providing a sense of place and enclosure. The project was really just a flat site when we began, and it was important that we provide basically a barrier to the busy roadway that's adjacent to the project. So that was kind of where the embankment slides came into play on the project. And then that also feeds into providing like vantage points for play area. So these are kind of like elements that you can, provide into design that, can be on a large or small scale. And the last that I think was really important with the project was the development of maintenance partners. And that was really the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy works on that. They're the stewards of that park. And they, from what I understand, they reached out to and worked with Hope Services and the Santa Clara County Office of Workability Program, and I think a few others along the way.
Thank you so much. We're going to shift to Charlene, and I want to hear kind of in the same context of in your experiences with your daughter, what beyond those basic ADA needs and that all-encompassing accessibility look like in practice.
So what brought me to this particular panel of today's event is the title, Designing Businesses and Public Spaces for People with Disabilities. So I want to elevate our discussion to a level higher, thinking about designing business as developing businesses, designing space as developing spaces. So what can we do in developing jobs, businesses, and spaces for people with disabilities? And we need to change our mindset. We need to consider people with disabilities as participants and workers and contributors, and not just view them as passively as consumers, as someone who take in the services provided to them. So that's why I like this angle of developing businesses, developing spaces for people with disabilities. And speaking of that, I have been involved in 3 projects. One is Ada's Cafe in Palo Alto, where when the Mitchell Park Community Center and the library was rebuilt, they set aside a space for a coffee shop. And the city of Palo Alto is likely to provide that rent-free. You can imagine Starbucks and Peet's Coffee, they all want to put in the bid for that heavily trafficked space. But the good thing is that our Ada's Cafe, Ada actually stands for Americans with Disability Act, right? But it also happens to be the owner's grandmother's name. So they also put in a proposal, and I wrote in the supporting letter for Ada's Cafe, and they got the bid. And now the cafe has been running for like 10 years. And my daughter sometimes volunteer to work there. Another space we developed together with the community is the Magical Bridge Playground. It's very much like the Rotary Garden Playground, a full inclusive playground for people with all abilities, not just physical disability, but also sensory disability, intellectual disability, as well as the seniors whose disabilities are changing or whose abilities are changing. And you see people go to the big swing, the bucket swing to enjoy themselves. So a third one is, I want to promote this, is the Friends Coffee and Tea right up the street on South Bascom. And you should go to visit it. It's developed by Friends of Children with Special Needs. They also provide job training for people with disabilities. And I helped with, I advocated for dedicating a store facing public, and also helped to design the interior layout so that you get customers as well as people with disabilities as workers or workers in training there. So these are really the things we should do to make the public space as a community and also as a place of employment or place of congregation for people with disabilities.
Thanks so much. We're gonna switch gears a bit to Tony. Tony, as you mentioned, is in the midst of setting up a neurodivergent inclusive cafe. So I'm hoping to hear a bit about, for other local spaces that want to improve accessibility and inclusion, but have no idea where to start. Where did you start? Where can they start? And especially, in the beginning of this project, how can they, from the onset, partner with the disability community and be hearing feedback as they're starting?
Great question. Thank you. When we started Andy's Cafe, we took the approach of, first listening, right? We didn't take the assumption that we knew everything. Okay. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not an expert, and every single day I'm constantly learning new things. Like I should have consulted with Karen here before doing my cafe, right? But for local spaces, looking to improve accessibility and inclusion, some of the things that come to mind is, first, consult with the actual users and the experts in the disability community. And so one of the things that we were able to hire from the neurodivergent community was partner up with nonprofits such as Ability Path and what Charlene was just saying, FCSA. I'm happy to say in the last 2 weeks now, we've hired 10 people from the neurodivergent community through FCSA and Ability Path, okay? And then the second thing is having flexibility in mind. And so when we were putting up this cafe, we thought about several things. And we incorporate and embrace technology and AI to make some of their tasks or job a little bit easier. So that's one thing we incorporated. The other thing that we did was creating sensory or quiet zones for sensory breaks, right? And then we developed what we call success stations, okay? And we put these individuals, we customize their individual needs at these success stations to see, to hone in on their superpowers is what I call it, okay? And that's been really, really wonderful to see them, really seeing their true strengths. And one other thing would be, like I was mentioning, or what we were talking about, partnerships, it must be reciprocal. Okay, and what I mean by that is, again, I am able to find these individuals through these nonprofits. And so we want these nonprofits such as Ability Path, FCSN, and even Maria's organization, Parents Helping Parents, which I am a proud board member of, to be at the table, right, and offer our space for community meetings. So we're not employing just individuals with autism, but we're learning from them, okay, and how we can adapt our business models using the insights that we get from these type of meetings, okay? The goal isn't charity, it's recognizing untapped talent and creating environments where everyone can thrive. When business approach inclusion in this way, this is, I consider, a competitive advantage, which I call the autistic advantage.
Fantastic. Thank you.
We're going to shift over to Karen now. I wanted to hear about maybe a moment, small, thoughtful design, something that maybe didn't cost much or didn't seem like a huge big deal at the beginning, but ended up having an outsized impact on accessibility.
Yeah, there's a few specific moments I was recalling from the Burberry Playgarden project. So one of them was the family style restrooms that we included, which were kind of a new thing, I think, when we initially folded those into the design. We also incorporated a large bench for adult changing, which didn't really increase the footprint of the building. It didn't increase the cost, but it's there, if it's needed. So it's not a requirement. It's not in the ADA code, but it was advocated for and requested, and we could do it. And since then, I'm always looking for that opportunity if I have a restroom in the project. This second was a realization, on phase 2 that phase 1 didn't have enough shade. And that was something partly that got cut out of the budget, which I, didn't advocate enough to keep it in the initial budget. So in the second phase, what we focused on doing was providing smaller size shade umbrellas next to each piece of new equipment to provide like a zone where someone could seek shade. And it's much more cost effective than trying to shade over an entire play area. So in this case, this project, was basically just an open grassy field. It had no existing trees, and it's very difficult to incorporate natural shade with, play structures. So the second, strategy we also used was, in phase 2, we focused more on providing planting areas more throughout the play area so that it brings down the ambient temperature. So even without the trees, the other plants, the taller shrubs, they're actually going to help with things like that. So those can be some kind of cost-effective ways to help with an existing or a new project. The other tip is when you think about somebody transferring onto a piece of equipment, if there are simple ways they can provide more handholds, which aren't very expensive, do it. You can request manufacturers to add more onto the equipment. So anything that can help with that, is generally really cost effective. And then the last is just, sharing of information. I know when I was, going through the initial design process, I reached out to professors and other academics to get information about what types of activities would be best for different types of children. And, some of that research was online. Some of it was shared to me by just simply reaching out to someone with a phone call. People were really gracious with their time. So, if you're, starting a new endeavor, this is kind of what this is all about, is just we're able to share information. But, if someone in the future is designing an all-inclusive play area, my door is always open. I'm happy to share the information I found and use to develop that project.
Thank you. So we've spent some time so far talking about what it looks like starting projects. So I want to bring it back to Tony a bit and discuss how inclusion is not just a one-off fix and that it actually requires ongoing maintenance and accountability. So I wanted to hear about what systems or habits can help ensure accessibility continuing long after opening day.
Good question. As someone who's a parent of an autistic child and a business owner that's building an inclusive workplace, right? Inclusion is what I found out. It requires a deliberate system, okay? And it's not just good intentions. So at Andy's Cafe, we've implemented several ongoing practices. One of them is a feedback loop. So we have regular check-ins with our employees and we ask these questions every single time. Is this working for you? Right? Another question is, what could we do to make your work experience better? This dialogue never stops, right? We always want to check in and see how they're doing. Secondly, we built accessibility into our standard operating procedure. So each process is documented and it includes accessibility consideration. When we train our managers, inclusion isn't a separate module, okay? It's integrated into every aspect of our leadership. And then third, we created accountability. So we have measurable goals. And so some of the stuff that we measure is we're going to be tracking employee retention rates is one. Another one would be promotion rates. How many of them got promoted? And the third one would be to fulfill accommodation requests, right? And so we would be checking these metrics on a regular basis with the leadership team. And then finally, which I think this is one of the most crucial things, is that we found out that hiring people with disability into and putting them in decision-making roles ensures accessibility is a priority, okay? Nothing maintains accountability like having advocates at the table, right, where decisions are made. So we celebrate these unique strengths that neurodiversity brings to our team rather than viewing accommodations as concessions. So when you frame inclusion as a competitive advantage, it just makes things more self-sustained.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna go to Charlene. Public projects often get celebrated even when they fall short for disabled users. We have heard a lot about that in previous panels where they're meeting the bare minimum, but we're waiting for them to exceed. To end on a positive note, I wanted to hear if you could share a project that got it right and what we can learn from them.
Thank you. So there's a nice project that I come back to Mitchell Park Library. It has the design, two-story design, such that you go into the library, but if you continue to go forward, there's a ramp going down to a space for children. And that's at the end of the building with the light in front of you. And the staircase going to the second story is on your left side, and later turn around and then on top of the ramp. So this is such a beautiful design because toddlers can actually go through the gentle ramp to the children's reading area without having to step down. Although there is also 3 steps on the other side that you can walk down. So they can be independent. They can run to their books, and the parents can also go follow them. And often I found that when parents are looking for their children, instead of going to the 3 steps downwards, they actually also like to go through the ramp, right? So this is the design that turns out works so well, and there's also handrail along the ramp, but it doesn't feel like it's for people on wheelchair. It's like it's for people with all ages, from toddler to seniors, and for families. So it is a good example of all-inclusive public space.
We actually have a little more time. Can I go back to you?
Yeah.
I wanted to hear about how we can work with public officials and larger organizations like business communities to do a better partnership with disability communities. Sorry, I'm catching you off guard.
I think it's change this one. Yeah, so it's all about giving the neurodivergent community access to these work opportunities. And so one of the organizations, because I've been in the restaurant space for over 20 years now, I had a meeting with a group called the NRA. And guys, I don't mean National Rifle Association. It's a restaurant association. Okay. And I met with the chairman of the restaurant association, and he loved the story of Andy's Cafe. He said that, Tony, when you have your cafe up, we would love to bring our crew down and do a film on your cafe. Now, just to give you guys some statistics on the NRA has over 100,000 members, 100,000 restaurant owners, and they oversee 500,000 restaurants, right? And so they said they wanted to showcase my story at the National Restaurant Association convention and show people like what this community can do, what are their superpowers. And my big wish is that if every single restaurant, right, hires one person, that's 500,000 people that now have jobs. So it's working with large organizations, right, like that, and also working with other community leaders. And it's all about community at the end of the day. So that's, this is one strategy to really get the awareness out. That's what I plan on doing in the future.
All right, thank you so much. Those were all of our pre-prepared questions. So we can go out to the audience briefly. We only probably have time for 1 or 2, but I can hop off this.
So this is a question for any of you. I work with College of Staff for individuals with disabilities. We have a workforce development program. I think it'd be great to collaborate with you. However, transportation is hard. I think we should have Lyft and Uber passes for people with disabilities that want to work in Palo Alto, but work or study in Saratoga area, for instance. Maybe there could be some donations for this. What do you think? If we can partner with a lot of these nonprofits.
I'm so glad you're thinking that way because we're going to be introduced to the people at Waymo. Yeah, so imagine autonomous driving, right? So I'm hoping that we're able to get, like you said, free credits so that the Waymo car can go to the house, pick up the employee, drop them off at Andy's Cafe, and take them back. That's how we would resolve.
It sounds like there are, rules with the ADA that give you a bare minimum that you mentioned. But then it sounds like there's also these ideas that you've come up with as you approach your designs. Is there a resource that builders or developers can go to that gives them all those ideas that you've already curated? We have a great breakfast place that we love going to, but it's so loud in there. I can't imagine that anybody in, a community with hearing challenges would be happy there. We are a family that needs to change our adult child in a wheelchair and would love if every bathroom had a place to do that. So I wonder, is there some, I don't know, magic list where you can go and find all the things that brilliant people like you have already figured out and tried and pass it on to the next builder? Sorry. So yeah, from the point of landscape architecture design, I have a list that I have for designing playgrounds, which I'm happy to share if you reach out to me. Yeah, there's not one place out there, but along the way I find various different groups. Sometimes I find groups through LinkedIn. So I recently found I think it's called the Starloft group, and they're out of Indiana. And so, but there's, I think it is an issue. There's not necessarily one fits all group to go to find out best practices. So it's kind of like you're relying on searching on the internet or hiring design professionals or reaching out to people who have done a similar project for you to kind of share that knowledge.
So it sounds like being a disabilities building code.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, and there's a couple different conferences throughout the year that sort of cover things, but again, they're sort of like sometimes they're just focused on play for all, so it's just very specific to playground design versus buildings. But there's Clemson University used to run a conference like that, and yeah, it's a lot of work trying to find this information. Yeah, those would be my suggestions.
Starbucks recently opened a new store in DC, or renovated store. They made universal design features throughout the whole Starbucks store. It's my understanding that they're going to roll out with the rest of the stores because they wanted to be more inclusive to people with disabilities. So go online and look out what are those steps that they took to make it more inclusive. I thought it's neat. I think it should have happened a long time ago, but it's sad that with the American with Disabilities Act, it's slow progress. I still have to fight for closed captioning. I still have to fight for sign language interpreting when I shouldn't have to, even with government agencies. It's sad. It's sad. And for the three of you, thank you for being part of the disability community and increasing more accessible space for our disability community. Kudos.
Yeah.
Great.
This will be our last one.
Hi, so my name is Gia and I'm with Housing Choices. I think Charlene and a few other members of the panel talked about how we shouldn't see those with disabilities just as always as consumers, but also as participants, volunteers, workers, and other roles that we, general population, takes on as we go about our day. Can you talk more about the mindset when you're developing spaces and businesses for those with disabilities, and like more about the mindset, I guess?
Okay.
Thank you, Gia. And I'm happy to share today is a wonderful day for County. Thanks to the help of housing developers such as Eden Housing and housing advocates such as Housing Choices, Alliances. Connie got her key to her own apartment today. I think it's also it's a positive sign that there are people and organizations who are very intentional and who are having a mindset of integrating our adult children or our community members with disabilities into the bigger picture, into the neighborhood and the community. I think this requires advocacy, obviously. So the mindset has to be intentional, and you need to remind people to keep thinking about this when they go about developing space, design space. I actually want to thank you, this the gentleman at the first row, for participating in yesterday's Cupertino City Council meeting. I wanted to go, but I couldn't. I live in Palo, but my father's family, they live in Cupertino. And the last time when such meeting was happening, they're currently traveling in China. I actually asked my sister-in-law to Zoom in to join the meeting by Zoom. I think we just need to be participants, be volunteer, be there and be outspoken about the need for housing, for public space, for jobs, for people with disabilities. And thank you for organizing today's meeting to get the like-minded people together.
Let me see if I could try to answer a different way. So when I was thinking of putting this cafe together, it was just trying to build a platform, okay? Because like I said, why is 85% of this population unemployed? What if I could find a way where we give these opportunities, we showcase that from the neurodivergent community, their true superpowers. So that as much as I want to keep them in hospitality industry, guys, I want to open the doors for tech, for healthcare, other industries to say, wait a minute, we're looking for employees too. And you're telling me that these guys with 4 to 6 weeks of training is able to run a cafe successfully? Why don't we look at this community and employ them in our industry? But we need a platform, we need a, I don't want to say case study, but we need to be able to show that awareness, build that awareness, so that I hope that more opportunities in other industries open up for this community.
That's just about our time. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. Thank you for being on our panel today. Let's do one last round of applause.
If we have any panelists from the previous panels, if you wouldn't mind coming up, we could get a quick photo maybe with these panels and previous panelists would be great. And then another photo with anyone else who'd like to be in it from today's event. We do have some wrap-ups as well. So for those on Zoom, I want to share a couple of wrap-ups beforehand. Let me go grab our boards and read a couple comments from the boards.
Good job, good job, good job. Yeah.
I'm getting up there. I just need to take a chair. You can step over. I have to use the. Or I can take it on mine. Yeah, Maria.
Yeah.
Tony.
All right, let me put this down for a second. Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
You know, I can have a better picture and do all of it. The projection into my face. Yeah. So you all have to move that way. Can we could have as far as you go. Yeah, some projection. Projector, that would be better because we're all getting. As you can. Thank you. Thank you, everybody online who joined us today. Exactly.
Thank you, and let's do a final photo in a couple minutes with everyone who wants to come here at the end. I did want to read out a couple of comments from some of our observations today. If anyone is interested in what your colleagues said, let's do a couple from the homes first. So a comment was, and these are again feedback on how to make places more inclusive, in this case specifically homes. For houses, less 2 stories and more 1 story, more universal design. At the front entrance, no extra steps and ADA ramps. Another one, homes make entrances exit easy for people to access, people in wheelchairs or limited mobility or vision impaired, low or no steps, wide hallways, bathrooms, kitchen access. Another person talked about a flashing doorbell. We heard that earlier. That was great. Let's pop over to public spaces or parks. We see a variety of equipment in parks to support different sensory profiles and different abilities. I wonder if Karen had that one written down. Probably. We have another one, accessible parks for children with disabilities. Another, absolutely benches are the place to start. Then we follow with shelter, sun and rain, drinking water, all the things human vehicles requires to access and navigate public space. So we've got one in the back and 2 up here. If you're in the room, you're welcome to come and check those out. For those of you on Zoom, we just want to say thank you so much. We especially want to thank 2 people on Zoom, which is our ASL interpreters. Thank you so much for being here and taking care of us. Yeah, you. Thank you. Thank you so much. We also want to thank again our sponsors and our volunteers who helped organize the event. So let me just make sure I don't forget, because I want to absolutely thank these folks. First of all, our sponsors, Borealis Philanthropy. We could not have done this event without them. In addition, we had support from Unlock, Vera West Credit Union, Kaiser Permanente, and the San Andreas Regional Center. I also want to thank our partners who helped organize the event, Housing Choices, All Things Disability, Silicon Valley Independent Living Center, Parents Helping Parents, DEAR, College of Adaptive Arts, and the County of Santa Clara Division of Equity and Social Justice. And a special thanks to my colleague Shalini for her help today, as well as to the core volunteer team who we would not have been able to pull off such a great event without Viviana Barnwell, Michelle Mashburn, where's Gia? Gia's still here, and Sherry. Thank you so much, all of you. So thank you everyone for coming. Feel free to interact with folks. If some people would be willing to grab some food, that may include an entire tray, and that would be okay. You're welcome to take some food with you, especially if someone at home or anyone who you know is unhoused might need some food. We would welcome you giving that, and you're welcome to grab a water bottle or two on the way out for your car for the next time you're thirsty. So thank you everyone so much for coming. We hope to do more inclusive development events in the future. And if you have ideas for what we should do, please let us know. So we're really excited. If you have any questions about Catalyze SV, you're welcome to ask me or Shalini. And thank you everyone so much for coming. Appreciate it. Sean, you want to stop the recording? You want to stop the recording?
Yeah. Stop.